This story begins in a distant underwater kingdom called Atlantis. Its empress is Tarasa Neptunus Atlantis. She was blessed by the seas and everyone loved her very much. The mage Kortan supported her in every way possible and said that her country would exist forever. First, General Doom worshipped her and promised to be with her until the very end. The girl asked Kortan whether he was swearing an oath to her as a lover or as a ward. The boy answered that, of course, not only as a faithful servant, but also as a loving person. The Empress said that today he was more gallant than ever. Whereupon, she asked her friend Duma if he did not think the same. The young man replied that he was faithful to her, just as he was, therefore she can always count on his help and support. Tarasa replied that she felt that way since they were the only ones left on her side. Our heroine thought it would always be like that until one moment. She accidentally overheard a conversation about how Dune was telling Kortan that he was, after all, well aware of his feelings. The young man had loved him for a long time, and he was so overwhelmed with emotion that his heart was ready to burst at any moment. The great magician embraced the young man and said that he knew it perfectly well. The girl was shocked by what she saw and heard because she did not even suspect that her childhood friend and lover had deep feelings for each other. Tarasa did not understand how Kortan could betray her like that because he had told her, looking into her eyes, that he loved only her and no one else. She couldn't believe it and thought that maybe she had imagined it or had misunderstood something. Suddenly, Doom and the other guards burst into the room where the Empress was. The young man said that she would never forgive him. The girl replied that she hoped that wasn't the case, but it turns out that they both betrayed her. The boy was surprised by what she said because she had found out everything. The magician said that it was even better because there was nowhere else to go, and it would be possible to deal with it as soon as possible. The young man grabbed her hand and said that he had something to show her right now. The first general wasted no time and went to close the front doors tightly. The traitors put her in magical chains. The girl screamed in despair. How dare they lie for so long, and how could they even do that to her? After all, she trusted them and loved them very much. Kortan apologized and replied that he just wanted to protect his beloved. Our heroine's lover and her longtime friend had committed a terrible betrayal. There were many unanswered questions in her mind, starting with why things had gotten to this point and ending with when things had had time to take such a turn of events. The Empress swore to herself that she would make them regret it and she would never forgive them in her life. Our heroine will curse them until the life in this world is extinguished. That very day she was sealed in chains of sadness and despair. So she spent a whole 1,000 years and thought only that she will never forgive them and will definitely take revenge. One day our heroine begged to be given at least one more chance. Apparently at that very moment someone heard her pleas and the seal that bound her began to crack. After a while, Tarasa began to hear strange sounds and smell blood. The Empress wondered if the seal had been broken. Some woman looked at her and told her not to worry. Suddenly this girl was struck by an arrow straight through the shoulder, but it didn't go through. She immediately fell to the ground, covering the child she was holding in her arms. The man who had carried out the attack had demanded that the Duke of Rission's daughter be handed over. Tarasa didn't understand what was even happening. That was how the Empress's second life began, after her rebirth. The seals of Kortan had been broken. Those magical chains no longer restrained her or held her down. She began to feel everything around her. The girl wondered what if she was back in Atlantis again. But Tarasa's behavior was somehow strange, and she realized that she had become a very young child. The Empress hoped it was just a dream, so she pinched her cheek to bring herself to her senses, but felt only pain. The maid turned to her and told her that she would definitely have to carry her to the imperial palace, so let Miss be patient for just a little while. The little girl was very surprised that she addressed her in this manner. The intruder put his sword to the woman's throat and told her that it was time for her to surrender. But if she let him take the child, he would let her live. She shouted back that she wasn't going to give anyone up and that he didn't know who she was. The man replied that Nicephore Resayan did, so let him give up the child whose name the Duchess was desperately uttering before her death. Whereupon he rushed to the attack, shouting that he must send her to her mother's house on the other side of the world. But suddenly the maid drew a knife and disarmed the insolent intruder. Our heroine noted to herself that apparently she was not just a maid, but it seems this was the limit of her abilities. All these mercenaries must be after her. If she were in her past body, she would wipe them out in a heartbeat. Her last memory of the Empress's life was a dream in which voices whispered to her that everyone had abandoned her, no one wanted her, and that Teresa was very pathetic and insignificant. The girl had seen the same dream for 1,000 years, so she decided that she would survive and take revenge on everyone for everything they had done to her. When the maid was attacked by the mercenary, the woman could not hold her baby in her arms, and she began to fall to the ground. The Empress didn't care if she was reborn again and in someone else's body. The only thing she had to do at this point was to help this woman. Magic power began to appear around the little girl, and she told herself that she had to survive. She didn't want to die again. The mercenaries rushed to her side to catch her, but her magic worked and formed a drip attack. Drops of water began to hit their noses, and the men couldn't breathe properly. The little one noted about you that if they couldn't breathe, they couldn't attack. The woman immediately rushed to hug her and tell her that she had succeeded in saving her. Like everyone said, Miss is a special child. Everyone was so worried about her, because after that prediction, the dynasty became a target for many. But our heroine stopped listening to her because she felt a painfully familiar smell, and it was the smell of the sea. Looking at the huge wave, which seemed to reach the sky, they did not understand what was happening, but one thing was clear. It is necessary to escape. Nisfor mentally asked him to stop getting so excited. Apparently, the sea had felt her aura for the first time in 1,000 years, and it was very pleasant, but let him stop his rampage immediately. The maid looked at her in surprise and asked if it was her power, too. Our heroine wondered if she could even say that this power was really hers, because the water felt Teresa's energy, and that's why she came. The woman stroked her cheek and said that she would very much like it to have such an incredible power. After all, as the prediction said, the little girl should be a dragon princess. The girl didn't understand what a dragon princess was and what it all meant, so she tried to indignate in her voice, but only unintelligible childish sounds came out. In the head of our heroine began to slowly surface memories of Nisfor. One of the first was of her father fighting off the mercenaries and covering her mother. The woman took her in her arms and looked into her eyes and told her that her daughter must definitely survive. Then she ordered the maid to run quickly and take Nisfor to the emperor immediately. Someone killed her parents, and Adele barely managed to get the little girl out of there. It seems our heroine has been reborn in another body. Perhaps she does not remember her past life well because of the seal of Kortan, but the girl knows for sure that Teresa is her and Nisfor is also her. The little girl couldn't get used to this little body. It was all very cute, of course, but it was extremely uncomfortable to move. She was the great Empress of Atlantis, and now she was a small child the size of a seed. But it wasn't bad at all that she was reborn as the Duke's youngest daughter. As she and Adele headed towards the appointed place, she saw a capital city that seemed very familiar to her. In her past life, this empire was hers, and she had created it on her own. This city was the capital of Atlantis. It turns out that this place is the country of those bad people who betrayed her and made her suffer for a whole 1,000 years. And from an empress, she turned into a daughter of a duke, but one thing was glad that not far away was the sea. Our heroine resented aloud that she would surely take revenge on Kortan and Dum, but only childish babble was heard. Adele entered the room and noticed that Miss was already awake. Taking her in her arms, the woman noted that she was probably not used to being in an unfamiliar place. At the moment, it is necessary to eat, because if she will eat well, she will grow up healthy. She looked at herself and thought that she really should grow up soon, because in order to get revenge, she would have to find out what spell had been cast on her. Then she looked at the servant girl and thought that she should let her already carry the emperor's food to her as soon as possible. But Nisfor did not look threatening, but only made cute noises, so the woman began to admire how pretty she was and how cute she was clenching her fists. Then cradled her to her side and said that if Mistress Ninnis saw her, she would be very pleased. Putting her back in her crib, the woman informed her that her older brothers should be back soon, for she had heard that the war with the Yorju pirates had ended just the other day. Nisfor did not understand what other brothers. Suddenly, the servants announced that His Majesty the Emperor was approaching. Our heroine suddenly felt the aura of a sea dragon and did not understand how this could be. After all, this is not Atlantis. When the little girl saw it closer, she thought it was Kortan, but then decided that she had imagined it and wondered who he was. Looking at the baby, the young man asked if she was the final offering. The child looked very much like her mother. The emperor then asked Adele if she had witnessed the last moments of the risen couple's life. The girl replied that she had only thought of saving the little miss, so she did not know what had happened to the hosts themselves. The young man became angry that the mercenaries were hunting this little girl because of the prediction. He was furious that how dare they even dare. The ominous aura was so strong that our heroine began to gasp and did not realize what was happening. After a moment, the man calmed down and said that they would hold the funeral of the Duke and Duchess after the return of their sons. They would choose the most suitable day for that. After which he added that this child might be able to cure the madness of the young dragons, so it was very important to them. Let Adele take good care of her. Nicephore wondered to herself what they were even talking about. She is a human after all, not some kind of medicine. Then the emperor added that fortunately the crown prince had a few options. Our heroine thought to herself that even if it does not include her in this list, but if he began to show symptoms of insanity, it is simply necessary to add water sea urchin and seaweed, then boil it all up and drink it. That's why he was attracted to her in the first place. Then she pointed out that she and Kortan looked exactly alike, but their personalities were completely different. The emperor leaned over to the little girl and said that she must be wondering who he was. He then explained that he was an old friend of Karzan Resian, who was her father and her mother, Ninnis Resian. He is also the monarch of the Kortan Empire, and his name is Agrio Lun Kortan. Nicephore was stunned by the information she heard and thought that this vile man had also named an empire after himself. If he wanted power so badly, he could have just asked for it. The girl wouldn't refuse him. From this, it appeared that this young man was a descendant of Kortan. Then she remembered how Doom had sworn his love to him and said that he loved him so much that his heart was ready to burst at any moment. Then she was angry because they loved each other so desperately, and he wanted to have a child with another woman. Then the young man sharply picked her up in his arms because he wanted to spin her around. The girl was in a lot of pain. She began to cry and thought to herself that whether he does not know how to control his power at all. The boy didn't understand why she was acting like that. She was hardly hungry or bored. Maybe she needs to change her diapers. And if none of this fits, then most likely she's expressing her love for him in her own way. Our heroine looked at him and didn't understand what he was talking about. The emperor told her not to look at him with such judgment in her eyes. Then he exclaimed that she was very sweet, interesting, and reacted to his every word as if she understood everything he said. The servant objected that she was still very young, so she could not understand speech. Kortan's face changed dramatically, and he asked how dare he argue with him. The man immediately began to bow and apologize to His Highness for such inappropriate behavior. Then the young man put our heroine in the crib and said that he could not understand if he was scaring her like everyone else. The little girl looked at him defiantly. The emperor realized that she was not afraid of him after all. Sometime later, Agrio remembered his friend saying that if they died too soon and left their children alone, he should protect them so that they would not become an offering, and Nicephore could lift the curse on the imperial family. The young man was angry that he couldn't do anything and he hadn't been able to protect anyone. The lad asked his servant what was going on in the Palace of Sacrifice and what was wrong with the child. The man replied that they had had a quiet night and there had been no other attacks. He then asked if His Majesty really thought that little girl was a dragon princess. The emperor started to get angry and ordered him to shut up, after which he asked did he really choose to die at his hands today? The Kortan imperial family has been under the same curse for 1,000 years. Members of the dynasty suffer from hallucinations that provoke them to go on a killing spree. They experience terrifying pain that covers completely the whole body, and gradually, all the emperors become insane. Therefore, the dynasty began to make offerings. The first of them was the Duchy of Reborn. The ancestors of the Reborn were the first and only dragon princess who was able to cure the mad emperor, and before she died, she said one thing. After many centuries, a new dragon princess would be born, then the sins of the Kortan imperial family would be forgiven. This became the legend of the empire. Everyone was waiting for the birth of this new dragon princess, and as soon as a child was born in the Reborn family, it was locked up in the palace, and then sacrificed to stop the madness of the crown prince. But even after all this, the child is entrusted by his friends, Agrio. Can his dynasty earn forgiveness for its sins? And what if she actually turns out to be a dragon princess? Then on the day the crown prince turns 19, she will have to be sacrificed. After that, the young man decided to go to the Palace of Offerings. The young man was very fond of this child, namely her chubby cheeks and indignant eyes. It seemed to the emperor that she was looking at him as if she wanted something, then said that if she smiled, he would decorate this room and add servants. Our heroine thought to herself that she had no need or interest in any of this. Nicephore did not want to do this, but will smile just for the sake of Adele, who visibly began to get nervous. This situation reminded her of the words of her lover who had betrayed her. He talked about the need to smile when she was trying to keep herself in control. If the girl does this, then the whole world will bow its head at her feet. So she began to smile with her toothless mouth. The emperor was amazed at her cuteness to the core. The servants and the emperor, for some reason it seemed that she said, "Daddy." They were very pleased that she considered Agrio to be her father. The young man noted that when she smiled like that, she looked even more like her mother. Then he handed her a toy and told her that when a child is born in Kortan, they give it a turtle so that it will live a long life. Our heroine thought to herself that this seemed hypocritical. After all, he locked her in the palace of offerings and wants her to live a long life. The puzzle wasn't adding up. The boy stroked her head and told her to take care of that turtle. It was the only way he could face her parents without remorse. When the young man went out into the corridor, the servants called out to him, but he asked them not to shout so much because his head was splitting. All these were symptoms of madness. In his head, the words resounded: kill, crush them all, wring their necks, rip their throats out. The services immediately picked him up under his arms and started asking him how he was feeling, after which they said they would bring him to the palace as soon as possible. The young man looked at them and stated that he was well aware that they were all spies of Roxborough. Realizing all this, he brought them here on purpose, and they stand there all smiling at him, completely unsuspecting. Now that they're sure the little girl's alive, they'll probably try to send in the killers again. If he's having a fit of madness, they're all just as suitable as an offering. The servants began pointing fingers at each other, trying to accuse the other of actually being a spy. But no words or excuses worked. The emperor had killed them with his own hands. Wiping the blood from his face with a handkerchief, he mentally turned to Ninis and told her not to worry, for the young man would surely protect her daughter to the very end. Meanwhile, Adele admired the little girl and said that she was simply magnificent. After all, the girl even understands words and practically does not cry, but in principle, the other and should not be expected from a member of the Resian family. The woman thinks that Nicephore even more talented than his older brothers. The boys, of course, are also consummate individuals and have a variety of talents. But she is such a babe and was able to show her abilities at such an early age. Surely Nicephore is only one such in the whole world, and her brothers will immediately realize it. Then Adele concluded that the baby wants to sleep and decided to put her to bed. She thought to herself that she had never had brothers. She was very interested in what they are. The girl began to wake up slowly from the fact that next to her someone was talking. A boy's voice said that this little girl was born fearless. Another voice said not to touch her, for he must be hurting her. A young boy exclaimed that, does he really think he's only breaking everything and smashing things around? The guy knows perfectly well how children should be treated. Opening her eyes, our heroine saw two guys in front of her and could not realize who they were. It turned out that they were her older brothers, Nathaniel Resian and Heiberg Resian, who were watching her with great interest. She noted that her brothers had returned after defeating the pirates, and they were all really something alike. Nathaniel exclaimed that she was so cute and watching them so closely. She must be interested in them, and she must be feeling their energy. Heiberg replied that maybe she did, because she was born with great power. The little girl thought that he could feel Tarasa's power inside her and began to ask for more details, but she only babbled aloud. The young men wondered what she even wanted to tell them and decided she just wanted to play a little or call them her brothers. Nathaniel said he had read a book on the ship about babies. At that age, they can already start to say some words. He then began to spell the word baby brother and asked her to repeat it. Heiberg said that it was a little early, but that she would start to grow up too fast and soon she would start to speak. Sis, after all, also carries the genes of the coral fairies. The coral fairy race is the strongest sea warrior race. They never retreat and are not afraid to look death in the face. Its representatives from birth have a strong fighting spirit and do not know what defeat is. Their abilities begin to unfold at a young age. Most of them have incredible looks, so people attack them in order to enslave them. The little girl assumed that those assassins attacked her mom precisely because she had something to do with coral fairies. Heiberg said that once a member of this race reaches adulthood, they become incredibly strong. The very first year of life, children have a very slow development. It's exactly the same with coral fairies. Perhaps this little one will be stronger than themselves and even their mother. The mention of the mother made Nathaniel upset and said that he still couldn't believe that this had happened to her. Then got busy wondering who dared to attack their parents. but Heiberg didn't know who it could have been. Nathaniel had it all out of his head and asked what reason there could be. Let his brother think about it. He's smart, after all. Heiberg answered that the Rician dynasty had so many enemies that they could not even be counted. Perhaps it had something to do with the prediction, and someone was anxious to do something about it. Nathaniel clarified which prediction he was referring to. It could be that she might be a dragon princess. Nathaniel listened with great interest and remembered that both the Emperor and Adele had spoken of a dragon princess. Could it be that this prediction was about her? Nathaniel said he had studied it, but he didn't understand what it said. Heiberg explained that the prophecy had been seen by 5 priests at the Ramoth shrine, and he believed it to be true. The brothers noticed the indignant look on the little girl's face and said that she must be interested in it too. Nathaniel asked if his brother thought the little girl understood them. The young man replied that there was no way they would know that at the moment. Then she began to tell him that the prediction about her was that when the time was right, the crack would open. After so much suffering, the purest power would blossom. The daughter of the sea will bless the young dragon so that it can finally rest. Then there will be prosperity beyond anyone's wildest dreams. Forgiveness and mercy must be asked for, but the pain of repentance will still remain. After hearing all this, it dawned on our heroine that the daughter of the sea is most likely about her. After all, Teresa was the Empress of Atlantis. She also noted that the words, after so much suffering, it's definitely about the Rician family. The words about the purest power growing is definitely the power of the sea. Besides, the daughter of the sea is Teresa, so the prophecy is clearly about her. At any rate, the main character of this prophecy is Teresa Neptunos Atlantis. Plus, her reincarnation happened at this exact moment. The girl thought that the shrine of Rame, who serves the god of earth, was asking for forgiveness from her, and it is extremely strange. But suddenly, Nathaniel picked her up in his arms. After the young man began to turn her from side to side, our heroine began to feel dizzy. Her brother exclaimed that she wasn't wearing any identifying marks, so how would they know she was the dragon princess? Taking her from his arms, Heiberg replied that they would have to wait for her to awaken, and that it was not a good idea to treat her like that. Once her powers manifest, she will make an agreement with the crown prince, and then the curse will be lifted. That is the essence of the dragon princess manifestation. Nathaniel began to calculate that the crown principal was now 5 years old, and the curse could be lifted at 19 years old. Then that meant we would have to wait for another 14 whole years. The young man then asked what would happen if she awakened in those 14 years. Heiberg replied that then they would be able to leave this place. After all, if the curse is broken, they will have no reason to stay there. Nathaniel replied with tears in his eyes that he was glad, because he did not want to die. He then asked how it was that the baby was born now, for the dragon princess had not been born for a long time, and so they had already given up. Then thanked Nicephor for having her and promised that they would protect her always. The little girl noted to herself that they must have been very afraid to die. After all, her brothers were still so young and were here as an offering, and they had no parents to try to protect them. This whole story now concerned her as well. Though she was not conscious at the time, her body remembers the warmth that came from her parents. Her father was very kind to her, and her mother fought to the last with all her might in order to protect her and not to give her an offense. Our heroine was very touched by all this, and tears began to flow involuntarily. She thought to herself that she had lived more than 1,000 years, but she behaved like a child. Nathaniel exclaimed that she had fallen asleep again. Heiberg told her not to wake her up and to leave the room. Her brother said he wanted to stay a little longer, but in that case he would come tomorrow and be sure to bring her lots of toys, so let her wait for him. As she fell asleep, the little girl thought that it would be good if they came again, as she would not be bored anymore. The conversation that had just taken place pleased her very much. In her dream, she dreamed again of the terrible nightmare that had tormented her for 1,000 years, of her screaming in chains, of being in great pain and having someone rescue her. A few days later, Nathaniel kept his word and brought her new rattles. They came to her every day since they first met. She began to babble a little, and her second brother began to call her foe. She was very pleased with her older brother's efforts to entertain her, but she thought she would rather see the sea than sit playing in her room. Suddenly, Nathaniel exclaimed why she was so sad and started trying to kiss her on the cheek. The girl resisted with all her might and resented him for daring to do so. Let him quickly get his lips away from her imperial body. The little girl tried to say that she wanted to go to the sea, but her brother decided that she just wanted to look out the window, so he brought her to it. There she finally saw the vast blue sea and thought that it was her homeland, which she loved very much. She would like more than anything to go back there to swim and frolic with whales and dolphins and sing songs with mermaids, plus sleeping on the backs of turtles. It all seems like it was like yesterday, but it's unlikely she'll ever be able to go back there again. The baby involuntarily began to tear there. Her brother was afraid that it was dangerous, so he decided to take her away. Our heroine thought to herself that Adele would have taken her there, but she had gone to help with the funeral preparations for her parents, and she herself can't do anything with this little body. Suddenly it caught her eye that Heberg was reading a book called The Tale of the Origin of the Dragon Princess and the Agreement with the Prince. The girl immediately began to reach for it and show in every way possible that she wanted to see it. But suddenly the brother took the book back and the little girl began to cry loudly. The brother exclaimed that she wanted it so badly, and then added that if the little sister wanted it, she should kiss him on the cheek. The Empress was forgetting that she had become a small child. Plus, it was also a brother, so she was extremely indignant at such a request. Heberg said that according to the book on children, they should be in contact with their parents physically. That way they feel loved and an emotional bond is formed. And since the parents are sadly gone, they will be replaced by him. Nathaniel exclaimed, "What about him? Because the boy wants to be kissed too." The young man then put the book in front of her and said that if she doesn't want to kiss him, she won't see the book either. Our heroine was very angry about all this. She resented that, where it is seen that the Empress of Atlantis kissed someone. Did he think that she would fall for such a cheap trick? Heberg began to take her in his arms and said that in order to get what you want, sometimes you need to be able to sacrifice something. Nicephore thought that she should not let herself be fooled, for her reputation was very important to her. But she kissed her brother on the cheek anyway, and the young man exclaimed that it was wonderful. Now he understood what parental feeling was. The little girl began to get even angrier and thought to herself that he should stop talking nonsense and give her the book quickly. As soon as it would be in her hands, she would start reading it with enthusiasm. Meanwhile, a guy was watching her from the chandelier. His name is Theo, and he is secretly guarding the Dragon Princess by order of the Emperor. His main task is to protect this girl from assassins. Therefore, he is forbidden to talk to her or let her know about himself. But he really wants to do it because she has such a cute little nose, beautiful pink hair, and chubby legs. She is very pretty, and besides, she is the daughter of Mrs. Ninnis herself. Theo noticed that the little girl was reading a book and was very surprised that modern children learn to read so quickly. Nicephore noticed that she was being watched and thought that the Emperor had indeed kept his promise and had provided her with a bodyguard. Also, the new maids would be arriving soon. She then continued reading the book that talked about the first emperor of Kortan. He was one of the survivors of ancient Atlantis when that thriving empire went underwater. Of all the apostles, only 2 survived and escaped safely. Emperor Kortan, with the help of magic, which he took from the sanctuary of the sea dragon, created a new empire. But soon there was a terrible reckoning. The price was a terrible curse placed on him by the sea monster. This madness could only be cured by the Dragon Princess, who is the ancestor of the Rizion family. Just before her death, the past Dragon Princess said that a new princess should appear after some time to save the imperial family. It is also known that after her awakening, she will have to make a contract with the crown prince. After reading this information, the little girl did not understand what it all meant, and how Atlantis could go underwater for good. Her empire went underwater every 10 years, but then returned to land. The sea and the land were constantly shifting. The Atlanteans were very close to the water, so they could breathe freely under it. Therefore, our heroine did not understand how the empire could drown and disappear because it makes no sense. Also, very strange was this curse, and the more you think about it, the more unusual everything seems. It was as if it was created intentionally. The agreement with the crown prince is made in due course at the central sanctuary of Rameth, but the transaction can only take place after the dragon princess turns 15. This book detailed the method of breaking the curse, but the girl wondered what the cause of the curse was, and what the sea dragon curse was in general. So she began flipping through the book and looking for answers to her questions. Because of this curse, all the muscles and joints are torn. Everything inside feels like it's turning upside down and it's hard to breathe. Then frightening visions begin to appear, and strange voices are heard in the ears. The voice of a young woman is always in my ears. She speaks terrible words associated with cursing, pain, and hatred. Also, many people hear the girl screaming loudly and cursing everyone. Closing the book, the little girl thought about the fact that such a thing would make her go crazy too. Even if it is just to imagine it, then already goosebumps on the skin. From what was written, it seemed that she had to be patient until her 15th birthday. It would be nice to make a quick agreement and forget about this place forever. It was unlikely that she would be forced to marry the crown prince. Then, thinking that she would like to grow up soon, she turned on her side and began to fall asleep. Some time later, Adele was about to enter the room and thank the maids for helping her prepare for the funeral. Looking into the nursery, the woman saw that the baby was sleeping soundly, so she thought that she must be very tired. After that, she covered Nicephore with a blanket and said that the place should be quietly cleaned up and left. When everyone had left, she woke up and started to stretch, thinking that Adele was here, but then she decided that she could sleep a little longer. Suddenly, she started to hear crying and pleading for help and thought of the same voice she had heard last time. Then she mentally began to turn to this man and ask him what she could do to help, because she could hear his voice. He said that he was in excruciating pain and his whole body was being torn into small pieces. Our heroine did not understand what to do and how to help. Then the girl began to see a little boy in front of her and did not understand whether it was an illusion or reality. The little boy began to cry bitterly and practically beg for help because it was incredibly painful. But Nicephore had no time to do anything as the boy disappeared. She did not understand at all what was going on here and who he was. The next day, the little girl could not get out of her mind what had happened yesterday. It could not be a mirage, for she had seen him suffer. She wondered if she would be able to meet him again. Adele turned to our heroine and told her that today would be the day of her parents' funeral. It was still unknown who was behind the attack, so it was too early to relax. Because of all this, she wished she had worn safer clothes. It's always windy at the seashore, so it's necessary to dress warmer, so she prepared a tight dress. And in case they try to attack her, she prepared an armor and wore a similar one herself. The little girl thought that a normal maid would not use armor in case of danger. Adele was becoming more and more interested in her as she had so many questions for her. In her native Atlantis, all funerals were held at sea. Their lives began in the water, and after death they had to return back. Apparently, it was exactly the same in this empire, as the funeral arrangements, clothes and all, reminded her of her homeland. The clergyman began his speech saying that today they had lost two of Kortan's defenders, the Duke and Duchess of Reborn. Thankfully, their children survived, which meant it was the will of the sea god. May the pain of loss be felt by no one and their children live long. Now it was time to send the two members of the Reborn dynasty on their last sea voyage. Nathaniel cried and cried out that they had promised to travel with him when he returned from the war with the pirates. Why didn't they keep their promise? His parents shouldn't have left them. If he was there, he would be able to protect them. The girl thought to herself that only in this life could she know parental love, but everything was ruined. She will never forgive the intruders and will definitely avenge her mom and dad. And for this, she needs to gain strength. While there is such an opportunity, it is necessary to collect the energy of the sea. She doesn't know when she will be able to go there again. Then her nose started to itch as if there were little grains of sand in the air. Then she sneezed and lightning and thunder immediately appeared in the sky. After scratching her nose, the girl apologized and said that it was so itchy that she couldn't even control herself. The voices of those present began to ring out, discussing that apparently even the heavens were angry because of their deaths. All of this was a clear sign of impending calamity. What would happen to the Reborn family if this girl did not turn out to be a dragon princess? Would their dynasty come to an end? She was angry that they dared to discuss such things so loudly in front of their children. Maybe they should all have their tongues ripped off to shut them up. But then she remembered again the words of Kortan, who had told her to smile when she tried to keep her temper, because if she did, the whole world would bow at her feet. The little girl thought it was worth a try because the emperor liked her smile, so she began to smile broadly. She thought to herself that they should all shut up at last. Everyone immediately stopped talking nonsense, left the discussion, and stared at this cutie with loving eyes. A while later, at the Memorial Banquet, those present marveled that the Duke's daughter was so cute when she made a serious face and did not even cry. Then one of the ladies wondered if the emperor was going to marry and approve someone for the role of Empress. Nicephore was surprised that His Majesty has no wife, but probably all this is because of his madness, and he is just afraid that he can hurt his wife. The girl started to leave, saying that they were worried about him, but the plus side was that there was already a crown prince. Our heroine started to get angry to herself that they didn't let her finish listening to the most important points. So she decided to use her powers and sharpened her hearing to such an extent that the whole hall could be heard. The girl talked about how His Highness was so weak that he couldn't even participate in such events. The other one picked up on the fact that the prince and princess in general should live a long life. She felt like he was becoming more and more ferocious. She heard about him killing all of his servants the day before yesterday. The young man was swinging a sword while holding it in his bloody hands, so how can there not be fear? Also, everyone talks about him squirming in pain and crying every day. The little girl thought of that boy who appeared to her and wondered if he was the crown prince. But her brother said he was 5 years old, but that child looked 7 at least, and he didn't seem so fierce to kill his servants, so she would have to find out in person. He had called out to her a few times before, and now she wants to do it herself in order to talk. If he can hear her voice, then let him answer her question if he is the crown prince. She began to hear again the crying of a little boy asking for her help. Then the little boy appeared before her, and she wondered if he was the one who was to be her husband. Meanwhile, a servant reported to the emperor that the Memorial Banquet had already begun. The boy replied that he would be there shortly and asked if Roxborough was present. The man replied that he had heard that they had just arrived with the prince. He then asked if His Majesty believed that it was they who had killed the Duke and his wife. The emperor replied that at least they were strangers who were wary of the Kortan Empire. If the Dragon Princess awakens, prosperity for the Empire is coming. They must be very afraid of that. Roxborough is a royal family that is the second most powerful after the imperial family. Therefore, it is necessary to suspect them first. The servant reported that during the investigation he searched all 3 guilds with assassins, but there was no trace of them. Agrio replied that he was sorry because if there was a single clue, he would have been able to behead the royal prince right now. Then he said that it was time to go, and he wanted to see their insolent faces. Meanwhile, the little girl looked at the boy and asked him if he had inflicted all those wounds on himself. But the boy did not answer or explain anything, but only asked for help. Then he began to fade away. The little girl was disappointed that he disappeared so quickly, for she had many things she wanted to ask him. The emperor appeared at the banquet and said that in order to honor the memory of the defenders of the empire and his friends, they had guests from faraway places. So let him come in here and everyone should greet him. Our heroine did not understand what this important person was, so she began to ask Adele for a hand so that she could see everything better. Gunther Jan Roxborough, who was the crown prince of the Roxborough dynasty, appeared in the room and greeted His Majesty. After which he reported that he had traveled a long way and thanked them for being so welcoming. Suddenly, the emperor became angry and said that no matter what, he still came here. He could not understand whether the boy had come to express his condolences or to check the result of their actions. Smiling Gunther replied that he could not understand their great loss. After all, he was still a child himself and had come here to comfort children who had lost their parents. Agrio replied that he liked it very much that he was so confident in speaking to him. Gunther thanked him and said that he had brought gifts for the bereaved, so let them take them as consolation. Our heroine wondered who these Roxboroughs were. Apparently it was a party at war with this empire. But what did the emperor mean? Did he really suspect this dynasty for the death of her parents? If they really did it, she would never forgive them. There will be no mercy for them diplomatically or politically. The girl would tear them to shreds and leave no wet spot of them. Adele didn't understand what was happening to her and began to ask if she was hungry or needed a diaper change. Paying attention to the little girl, Gunther thought that she must be the girl. Our heroine looked carefully at his face, and it seemed very familiar to her. In Atlantis, too, there was an arrogant brat who was just as stupid and stubborn, and yet he dared to sass her every chance he got. The little girl started to reach for him and wondered to herself who he dared to stare at, because he still had 1,000 years to live before her. Adele tried to calm her down and told her that it was better not to mess with him, but Nicephore said to herself that she never backs down from a battle. Gunther started pointing his finger at her, saying that she was some kind of weirdo, and there was absolutely nothing special about her. Why did everyone think that the prediction was about her? Even up close, the little girl is absolutely no different from other children. Our heroine's eyes darkened from anger and such insolence, so she hit him on the head with the palm of her hand. From surprise, the insolent lost his balance and fell on his heel. Witnesses to this scene were shocked. The boy did not even have time to begin to resent, but again received a palm on the face. Our heroine smiled and mentally asked him how he liked her spankings. Gunther was tired of putting up with it, and he swung to hit back, but the girl began to sob loudly. Adele immediately shouted, "How dare he take a swing at a small child?" The boy began to try to justify that she was the first to hit him. Her brothers came to her defense. Heborg asked him what he was doing if he had decided to hurt his sister. The Crown Prince of Roxborough began to try to justify again that she was the first to attack him, but from everywhere began to come reproaches that, after all, she's still quite a baby, and to raise a hand on a small child, it is unacceptable. Our heroine smiled wryly and thought to herself that this little one should still go to study, because he is 1,000 years away from her. In the meantime, the Emperor marveled at how amazing she was because she had slapped that arrogant boy. The servants immediately said that he was right and she was really amazing. They could even hear the sound of the blows and how such small hands could hit so hard. Agro said that she was just a cutie and would like to turn back time to see that scene again. One of the servants remarked that it was the first time the Emperor had smiled like that since the Empress's death. The young man replied that not only had he lost his sister, whom he deeply respected, but he had also said goodbye to Karzan and Ninnis, who were his close friends. Now he simply had to protect the two, the crown prince his sister had left behind, and his friend's child, Nicephor. His Majesty then asked if they had prepared the maids to work in the Palace of Offerings. The servant replied that they had chosen the very best, so he could not worry about it. Our heroine recalled how she was resting with Dum and Kortan, and the latter asked her not to look at him like that because he couldn't concentrate. The girl apologized and said that he had such beautiful hands that she wanted to hold on to them all the time. The young man objected that it was not appropriate for her to apologize so often. Teresa agreed with him and said that he was right as always. Meanwhile, Doom watched with sadness in his eyes. The Empress of Atlantis was torn with hatred and resentment. She thought about cutting them both into little pieces for what they had done. She wondered why and for what they had betrayed her. But despite everything that had happened between them, the girl still misses her very much. Nicephorus wants to find out what happened to her homeland Atlantis and why Kortan betrayed her, and for that she needs to get access to the secret library. Therefore, a way must be found to get there. The next day, new maids arrived at the palace, and their names were Nilla, Bavaki, and Meryl. Nilla said that they had brought a present for her and asked her how it was and whether she liked it. The little girl was very pleased with it, for now she could move freely, and as soon as she got into the walker, she ran away from the room. Finding herself near the window, the girl began to watch the blue sea in which she had lived for so many years. Suddenly, the crown prince appeared in front of her again, saying he was in pain and begging for help. She began to reach out to him and talk about how she would find him soon, let him not suffer like this. Nicephor then noticed that the same inscriptions in the Atlantic language had appeared on their foreheads. The little girl found herself in a room and could not understand what had happened, if it was teleportation. But then she saw the crown prince, who was lying in bed and obviously felt very bad. She didn't understand what was wrong with him if he was dead, but then she touched his face and made sure he was still alive. Then she noticed his horns and exclaimed in surprise that the crown prince had dragon's blood in his veins. But if he is so sick, then why is there no one around him, and this boy clearly does not look like a 5-year-old child? Nicephor then marveled at his perfect facial features. Nathaniel and Hyborg were certainly very handsome as well, but this prince was the height of perfection. The boy was clearly her type, and such beauty made her want to protect him. Such a little boy was in great need of care, so she placed a cold bandage on his forehead. Opening his eyes, the crown prince was very surprised to see this girl beside him. Our heroine exclaimed that he shouldn't be so worried because to her he was nothing more than a wounded seal. The boy looked at her and did not understand what she was saying and where she had appeared in his room. Suddenly the prince began to have a kind of convulsion, and Nicephor wondered if it was because of madness. She began to remember that besides the agreement in that book, there was another way to help him. Before the contract, one could alleviate the symptoms of the crown prince's insanity with resonance. But she didn't understand how she could touch him now, since he was in so much pain. But suddenly, the crown prince held her so tightly against him that the little girl couldn't breathe at all. As she pulled herself out of his arms, she wondered why he didn't ask for help, as he had done before when he appeared before her. Maybe she saw his inner state, but in any case, she even liked his stubbornness. The next day, only opening her eyes, our heroine heard a voice that stated that she was already awake. It was the crown prince, who was sitting in a chair. Around him hovered the aura of a sea dragon, which surprised Nicephore very much. Tiny felt that he possessed incredible strength. It was equal to the one she had at his age, but unlike her, he seemed to be hated by the sea. The girl approached him in order to try something to help deal with his power. After a while, the little girl stated to herself that he must have felt better for sure. The crown prince noted that it was just amazing, but when he looked at her, he felt better and there was no pain at all. So she is the dragon princess from the fairy tale. Did she realize that they were in resonance, and the older he gets, the stronger the resonance will be? Then thanked her and told her that he felt better now. Then he asked her if she was hungry. Maybe he could get her some milk. The little girl thought to herself that she was getting sick of milk. She wanted a well-cooked steak and shrimp fried in butter and let them start her on at least a complimentary food. Suddenly the boy laughed and said she was very funny. Then he said that she seemed to want something else. The girl wondered if he had heard her thoughts. The prince replied that he had. When she is very emotional, he can hear what she is thinking in fragments. Meanwhile, a servant came into the bedroom and was very surprised to see Miss Rasan there. The boy replied that there was no need to shout like that. Let him just bring him and that girl some food. Then the prince turned again to our heroine and inquired what her name was. But he added that in order to find out her name, he would have to call someone who knew it. Nicephore thought about what she could say herself. It was just that he wouldn't understand. Suddenly, the crown prince added that he didn't want to let her go anywhere and wondered what he should do. The girl exclaimed that let him stop because he wouldn't be able to take care of her. Then she thought of a way to tell him her name and decided to use the water that was in the kettle to make her name out of it. The boy replied that it was a pleasure to meet him and his name was Zion. Nicephore thought to herself that he could do such a trick with his eyes closed too, and it probably didn't surprise him all that much. Then the little girl began to look at him and thought to herself that he was really 5 years old, for if you look closely, he does not look like an emperor at all, but he has very beautiful eyes. The boy replied that he was really 5 years old. Our heroine was confused because she had forgotten that he could hear her, but the boy replied that he read this question in her eyes. Members of the imperial family grow up faster than other children. He is the son of the previous emperor, and the current one is his mom's younger brother. Noticing his intense gaze, our heroine thought to herself why he was looking at her like that. Hearing her thoughts again, the crown prince replied that she was very sweet and understood everything that was going on around her. She just doesn't know how to talk yet. Nicephore wondered if he had decided to melt her heart with his looks. It seemed she wouldn't mind marrying him. Then lift the curse on him, just divorce him and run off to make her own life. On top of that, she felt really bad for leaving him in such terrible agony. Suddenly, the door opened abruptly, and Nathaniel and Adele appeared in the bedroom. There was horror on their faces for some reason. Her brother started to shout that she even realized how worried he was, but then turned his attention to His Majesty and saluted. The boy looked menacingly at the maid and asked if he was the one who had asked to bring food, and along with that summon a bunch of other people. The woman fell to her knees and said that she was only bringing breakfast, then began to beg him not to kill her. The little girl wondered if it was okay to kill for something like that. Then she mentally began to ask someone to do something to lighten the mood. But suddenly, she smelled the aroma of well-cooked meat and could not think about anything else. After all, the babe was as hungry as a wolf. Let Sion just give her food and not kill that maid. Nathaniel didn't understand her hysterics and began to worry what was wrong with her. Maybe she was in pain. Sion benevolently told the maid that she could go. The woman was in tears and thanked him. Then the crown prince began to feed our heroine, as he realized that she was very hungry and she was tired of milk. The girl was happy that she was tasting normal food, and she started to like this boy more and more. Nathaniel interrupted their idyll and gently asked if they could take Nagfor away after he fed her. After all, they were very much worried about her. The little girl thought to herself that it was not at all surprising, for she had disappeared quite suddenly, but she would hate to leave Sion behind. The boy replied that he refused, as she did not want to be in the Palace of Offerings, but wanted to be here at his place. Then he turned to the little girl and clarified whether he was saying everything correctly. Our heroine thought to herself that all this time Sion was completely alone, although he looks absolutely healthy, but he was struggling with himself and suffering terribly. Even now he can barely stand on his feet. While Nicephore was in thought, the boy added that he would give her anything she wished. So let her stay by his side. The girl mentally begged Nathaniel's pardon, for it seemed to her that she could not leave him alone. After a while, the servants began to whisper that this child and the crown prince were not suitable for each other. The little girl wondered why Sion was silent, for she had heard everything perfectly, and so he did too. The man and woman did not stop talking and continued to discuss what would happen if the prince harmed the duke's daughter. Apparently, very soon she would become an offering for him. The prince suddenly stopped and turned to Joseph, saying that he had one task for him. Have him take that man away immediately, and as punishment give him 30 strokes of the whip on his back, and then dismiss him from the palace. The man shouted to his highness that he was wrong, begging him to be spared and not killed. But Sion was undeterred and would listen to no one. Nicephore noted that it was a clear attack of madness. Already sitting in the carriage, the young man asked her if she thought he had overdone it. The little girl replied that she did not. It was perfectly deserved. The boy said he wouldn't have paid attention if he had only talked about him, but the prince would never forgive someone who would involve the little girl in dirty rumors. The man forgot his place, so he should be punished. And actually, it's very surprising that she's just a little girl, but she seems already big like him. Maybe she has another appearance that he doesn't know about. Our heroine was shocked and thought that if he felt something. But the crown prince added that she is from the Rizaean family, so anything can happen. The little girl thought that he must have just asked, and she was already surprised. Suddenly, Sion kissed her hand and thanked her for not being afraid of him. He really wants the girl to grow up and learn to talk. Suddenly, the boy began to change in his face, and our heroine did not understand what was happening to him. His breathing became more rapid, and his body became cold. These were symptoms of a fit of madness. The prince began to involuntarily brush his face and told her not to do anything, as it was very dangerous. Realizing that he was inflicting these wounds on himself, the little girl holding his hand screamed at him not to do that. He couldn't control himself during the attacks and is ready to attack at any moment without realizing it. And that strange sound she heard earlier happens when there is an absorption of another's power. It's a reaction of rejection energy that rages inside his body and begins to torment him from the inside. But in Atlantis, absorbing another's power was punishable by death. I don't think he killed someone to take someone else's power. What had Kortan done to make his descendants suffer so much? The little girl felt sorry for him and rushed to hug him, telling him to come to his senses as soon as possible. Our heroine climbed into his arms, begging him to wake up and begin to slowly resonate. Suddenly, the young man came to his senses and fearfully asked if she was all right, then exhaled in relief and said he was afraid she was going to get hurt because of him. Nicephorus mentally asked if he knew his symptoms. The boy informed her that he actually suffers from insanity. If during his attacks he loses control and is stopped, he may attack. So he thanked her for not doing anything about it. The girl realized that was why there was no one around him. After all, there were servants who died because they tried to help him. If she could find the secret imperial library, she could find out what spell Kortan used. Once the power was absorbed, it was passed down from generation to generation, so it was definitely something forbidden. If she had noticed Kortan and Doom's treachery sooner, the boy would not have suffered so much. Meanwhile, the carriage stopped, and the coachman informed His Majesty that they had arrived at the place. Then they started up the steps to a large building, and Nicephore did not realize where they were. What she then saw in front of her simply amazed her. It was a huge image of Tarasa Neptunus of Atlantis, which she was just on another case. Sion had warned her that it would be very noisy inside, so don't let it scare her. The little girl thought to herself that she was already scared enough. What a scoundrel Kortan was, how dare he carve her face. When the boys entered the hall, everyone present began to wonder why he had come here, even with Rison's daughter. The boy bowed and greeted His Majesty the Emperor. He, in turn, was also surprised that they were together and asked what was wrong. Sion replied that he had come to deliver a piece of news. He resonated with Nicephorus. Everyone around them was shocked and immediately rushed towards them, and the little girl didn't understand why they were reacting like that. People started asking what condition he was in, for by the looks of it, nothing seemed to have changed yet. The baby seemed to be fine too. She was perfectly healthy and still as adorable as ever. The emperor said thoughtfully that it meant that there was no change after the resonance, and that she had become an offering in the legends, but at the moment, the result was different. So it was necessary to find out more about it. Heberg turned to His Majesty and said that even if Nicephore was a dragon princess, they all shouldn't discuss matters concerning her without her relatives, then asked if he could make a formal protest against the crown prince. Our heroine noted that apparently Nathaniel had informed Heberg of everything that had happened. They are both concerned and angry at the moment, but this could cause problems after all. They shouldn't be behaving like this with the emperor. The people present were also outraged after all. How dare he be rude to the emperor, even though they belonged to the risen family. They really hoped that they wouldn't be killed right now. The little girl started waving her hands and trying to show that she was fine and shouldn't be so worried. The brothers realized that they had overreacted, so they bowed and apologized for their rudeness. Heberg then added that Nicephore belongs to the Ricion family, and while the crown prince reported his residence with her, they were unaware of it. He believes that everything that happens to their sister should be known by her family first. And before having these gatherings, he wished they were informed as well. Nicephore thought to herself that they were right. This is about their status as an offering after all, so Nathaniel and Heiberg should know about such a thing. His Majesty coughed and said that he hadn't thought of it. He would take it into consideration next time. Today is a momentous day, so it is necessary to put this matter aside for later. He formally congratulated them on being released from the status of an offering. Heberg thanked His Majesty and asked for permission to ask a few questions of the people present. The young man turned to them and asked if there was any chance that the dragon princess's strength or quality of life might decrease, or if someone would take away her abilities. The offering originally existed to prevent the attacks of the crown prince who couldn't resist the sea dragon curse. Then, if the power of resonance increased and with an agreement, the curse would be broken, but the dragon princess would not be around, wouldn't the prince suffer more seizures? Little noted that apparently Heiberg wants to hear that if Scion starts to feel better, the dragon princess might not be around him. Though she herself doesn't plan on being around that boy for the rest of her life, when his condition improves a bit, she will travel and enjoy her freedom. In her previous life, she couldn't afford it. The man replied that they resonated too little, so it is necessary to observe for at least 3 months. Everyone is aware that there are very few records of the past dragon princess, and most of them are in the secret library. The emperor asked if it turns out that insanity is too hard to cure. The man replied that it was worth studying the current princess a little more closely, especially since she is of the coral fairy race. Hearing about the secret library, our heroine began to show in every possible way that she also wants to go there with them. Scion clung to her and told her not to worry so much because he couldn't hurt her. The little girl thought disappointedly that she wasn't worried about that at all. He knows very well what this feeling is, so he won't be able to hurt her. Let her not be afraid of him. Our heroine thought to herself that there are no people in this world who can hurt her. She just wants to get into the secret library. The hereditary principal pressed her against him and said he understood everything. Nicephorus didn't realize to herself exactly what it was that he understood then. Why aren't there even glasses of water at this meeting? She would have shown him exactly what she wanted. Can't wait to grow up and start talking. Suddenly, the emperor announced that starting from today, Nicephore's location will change. There is a palace that has been prepared especially for the dragon princess, and she will definitely like this place. The next day, Adele was showing our heroine her new room, and she was absolutely delighted. The little girl noted the huge bed and concluded that it was perfect for the Empress. The other maids looked at everything in the bedroom with interest and noticed the beautiful shoes, which they immediately wanted to try on Nicephore. The brothers came into the room and asked why it was so noisy. The maids immediately bowed and greeted his lordship. A servant handed Nathaniel a trunk, and he told his little sister that he had something for her to see. Showing her the bracelet, the young man said that it must have belonged to their mother. Our heroine noted that it is a stone of luck, huge monsters. It's very hard to get. I wonder how they got it. Adele exclaimed that this bracelet was lost when she and the princess were running away that very day, then wondered how it could have gotten here in the first place. The brothers asked in surprise what she meant and asked her to elaborate. On the morning of that ill-fated day, Mrs. Ninnis had put this bracelet on the princess's hand, but suddenly a mercenary appeared, and while they were running away from him, the jewelry fell out and was lost. Perhaps it happened near the entrance to the manor. It fell out of the princess's hands, but they couldn't go back. The little girl realized that Adele had not been hurt in that very showdown because of that stone. But after they had left the manor, the mercenaries had been quick on their trail, and just at that time she had realized that she had been reborn. Nathaniel explained that the bracelet had been lying by the fireplace. Now it was clear, because it was the secret exit. Then the older brother put the bracelet on her hand, and she thought to herself that her mother must have sensed that something bad was going to happen. Suddenly there was a rumble. It was Bavoki who tripped and fell, breaking the dishes. Then she got upset and started apologizing. Nathaniel stroked Nicephor's head and said that there would soon be a party to celebrate her becoming a dragon princess, and it would be held in the Pearly Palace. Heberg added that according to custom, the host of the feast should organize everything, but since she was still very young, he took the job upon himself. The heroine thought to herself that it was fine, because she had never organized such events and Kortan had done everything for her. Then Heberg added that it would be in 2 weeks, so let her know. Then he was about to leave, but Nathaniel exclaimed that he wanted to be with Foe a little longer. Then he pointed to the jewelry cabinet and asked his brother if he had accidentally ordered it, especially for his sister. The little girl thought to herself, in order for such a one to be made in time, it should have been ordered the same day the brothers met her for the first time. The older one didn't say anything in response, but just looked at Nicephora. She thought to herself that it was the look of a man who said with his whole appearance that he was still better than this emperor. Nathaniel started rambling about how they had bought the jewelry inside that cabinet together, and when they had defeated those pirates, they had taken their treasure. Heberg said they had too much to do, and it was time to go. Her brother took her hand and told her that it was still time to go, but he wanted to live with her in that pearly palace. But since they are no longer an offering, they should live in the duchy of Rezion's estate. The little girl stroked his head and told him not to be sad and let him go already, for Heberg was waiting for him. After he left, our heroine thought about the feast and concluded that something must happen on it. 2 weeks later, the maids admired the little girl, who was dressed in a festive outfit because she was the most charming in the world, and it is impossible to look at her without emotion. The girls were sorry that only one maid should accompany her to the feast. Bavoki exclaimed that Adele must memorize every detail and trifle connected with their princess in order to recount and then in detail how everything went on. After a while, they were descending the stairs to get to the hall where the feast would take place. On the way, they met Sion, who informed them that he had come for Nicephorus. Our heroine thought to herself that he looked more and more handsome every day. The little girl began to reach out to him, and the boy said he was feeling great today thanks to her. Even when he was just walking towards her, he felt better and better. Our heroine thought to herself that it was no wonder, since she had been by his side these 2 weeks. The prince said that when they enter the hall, there will be a lot of annoying people there, and the aristocrats will obviously not like the news that they resonated. They can't be happy with the fact that the imperial family is strengthening their position. They only want their influence to stop more, not the other way around. That's why people can openly show their dislike for her. The little girl mentally replied that there was no need to worry, as she never backs down from a battle. Then added that one shouldn't be so skeptical. After all, they weren't going to war. After all, they had all come to congratulate her and were not likely to go overboard. Nicephor objected that she must always be on the alert. But if anyone dared to give her any trouble, she would kill them all. So don't worry. She thought to herself that he was the one who was scaring her the most at the moment. After that, they entered the venue and were loudly introduced as the Crown Prince and Dragon Princess. The attendees immediately split into 2 camps. Some admired and said that she was simply adorable. Others waved their faces and said that they expected something more, since she was a dragon princess. The little girl was extremely angered by the latter, and she exclaimed that she remembered their vile faces. The prince noticed her strange behavior and said that she must have liked something very much. Adele decided to take her in her arms and asked if Her Highness would like her to put her in a walker. The girl didn't mind at all, for now she might have a chance to enter the secret library. Sion carefully shouted to her to be careful not to fall. Our heroine thought to herself that she was, after all, in a walker. How could she ever fall out of it? Then she decided that, first of all, it was necessary to deal with those people who did not like her. Meanwhile, the men were still discussing the fact that she was only a child and what kind of power she might have. The only thing was that she was good with her face, and when she grew up she would be something to look at. One of them exclaimed that Duchess Rason had too high an opinion of herself because of her looks. Suddenly, the liquid from his glass splashed into his face. His companions asked him in surprise why he was acting like a little child and spilled the champagne on himself. The boy objected that it had poured itself out. Didn't they notice it? The little girl, on the other hand, was contentedly watching everything from the sidelines and thinking that she would not let this wrinkled uncle insult her mother. Now her business in the banquet hall was over. Next was to suppress her aura so that no one could sense it, after which she jogged away from the hall in search of the secret library. Stopping near one of the doors, she decided to use her magic power to knock loudly. The doors were immediately opened by an angry young man who exclaimed that he had asked for silence. How many times can you say that? Who knocks on the door like that anyway? But then he looked down and saw the dragon princess in front of him. Meanwhile, the little girl noted the stars that were pinned on his cloak and realized that he was a high-class mage. The girl wasted no time and ran to the room to find what she needed. Grabbing some papers on the table, she realized that it was the language of the sea giants and the ancient Atlanteans' tasks on magic. Then she concluded that this young man had come here to learn. The wizard started to panic when he saw that she was touching such valuable papers because it was not a toy at all. Our heroine noted to herself that absolutely on all the sheets there were mistakes. Nicephore decided to point out to him the correct answer. The guy asked in surprise that really Her Highness pointed out to him his mistake. Then the realization of his blunder came to him, and he said in surprise that how could it be that even a child knew better than him? On top of that, she also knows the language of the sea giants. Then exclaimed that it was definitely not just intuition, after which he introduced himself to her and said that his name is Jackalot. He really wants to become her apprentice. It doesn't matter how she reads and solves these problems, just let her teach him how to do it. The guy wants her to be his mentor. The girl thought to herself that she had completely forgotten that all wizards are a little crazy, because a child to be called a mentor is very silly. But then she decided that this was a chance for her, because everyone would consider her a genius and she could slowly reveal her powers. Then there would be fewer attempts on her life, and if it was revealed that she was smart, she could ask for access to the secret library. Jackalot exclaimed again with hope in his voice if Her Highness would accept him as her apprentice. The little girl decided that the first thing to do was to cry loudly and in such a way that someone would hear and come there. A second later, the doors opened and her brothers appeared with the crown prince, who exclaimed who dared to offend her. Our heroine did not expect it to be so fast. Did they really stand right outside the door? The guys began to reprimand him and tell Nicephore that you cannot communicate with such because it is a bad uncle. The girl then began to demonstrate that she needed water, and Jackalot immediately brought her a glass. With the liquid, the girl wrote that she wanted them to call the chief magician as she needed to make a deal with him. After a very short period of time, the chief mage and the sage were already sitting at a table near the emperor. The little girl thought to herself that she only wanted to talk to the head mage in order to be given access to the library. Okay, Eliad Eblos came. After all, she wanted to see her. But why did the great sage Ingenios show up? Jackalot exclaimed that the dragon princess was a true genius and very smart. She was able to solve a hard problem in the language of the sea giants in an instant, and the answer was absolutely correct. The head mage asked if he could be held accountable for his claims. The young man exclaimed that he was putting his credentials as a wizard on the line. Eliad unrolled the scroll in front of her and told Her Highness to read what it said. The little girl noted that it was a collection of recipes for the dishes of the sea giants. 531. Then she began, with the help of water, to translate what it said. The sage was struck by such amazing power and asked what. Did she really know the language? The little girl was indignant. Why did he stick his face to her and she had shown him everything, so why ask? The head mage was also shocked and asked when she had learned to use magic. The girl first thought about what to answer, but then wrote that she just knew since she was born. The emperor replied that since she was from the Risen dynasty, so it was not surprising at all. Her older brothers are also excellent at everything. There was no way the mage could explain this brilliance. After all, she was just a child. The young man objected that the world was full of people much more brilliant than her. Is she saying that they should deny her talent just because a woman can't recognize it? His Majesty said that he has decided to keep her abilities a secret for now. Even if she's a genius, it doesn't change the fact that she's still a child. They can't take away her childhood, to which she has every right. The sage pointed out that he should live another couple decades to see the adult princess and work with her on various research. The mage countered that she should live even longer than him in order to develop different types and techniques of magic together. The girl resented to herself that no one cared about her opinion, since she hadn't given her consent in the first place. Then she wrote with water that she needed access to the secret library. If they let her in, they would get very valuable information through her. The emperor replied that that might be true, but she still couldn't go in there. If he opens the secret library, her secret will be known even in the neighboring territories, and it will put the little girl in even greater danger. The sage and mage exclaimed that if Her Highness would help research ancient magic and ancient language with history in 10 years, then they have something to offer. His Majesty asked that were they really thinking of making a deal with him. Ablos replied that no one would say anything if he brought papers from the secret library. The little princess will be able to look through them in his office. After all, she is just a child, and no one will even suspect that she will be the one looking through the old papers. Agrio asked her what she thought about it. The little girl began to show that it was a wonderful idea. Then the young man asked what she wanted him to bring from the secret library. The girl pretended that she wanted records about the first emperor or papers related to the death of the ancient empire of Atlantis. After that, she thought that she had to find out at least some of these things so that she could move on. It turned out that Sion was hiding in the room where the conversation was taking place. The emperor asked him to come out and asked if he had heard everything. The boy called the emperor his majesty and replied that he had. The young man objected that he had asked to be called uncle in private, for the place was rightfully his. The crown prince sat down on the couch and asked what he wanted to receive from the chief magician and sage. The emperor replied that he himself was well aware that the situation was not the best. They do not know what Roxborough intends to do, and it is likely that these people are preparing for another attack. They could declare war now and slaughter them all, but life for their people could get even worse. So when the time comes, they will be bound to become a force for the empire. Little noted that he wanted to use wizards and sages if a bloody war suddenly broke out. A true emperor should ponder like that. But then the young man added that the symptoms of insanity were increasing more and more every day. He will hold on as long as he can, but he doesn't know when the limit will come. The boy got upset and asked him not to say such things. The girl wondered how they had to feel. After all, she had goosebumps running just from what she had managed to read in the book. She was afraid to even imagine what it was like to experience such horrible pain. Despite all of this, His Majesty still cared for his nephew and tried to endure everything, saying that he must improve. Until the boy grew up, he would have to wear clothes that were not made for him. The little girl couldn't say anything to them. Even if they were Kortan's descendants, it didn't make her feel any better that they were suffering. Since she is a small child at the moment, she is unable to solve their problems. Therefore, she would have to wait for her own adulthood. From that moment on, the days passed slowly and quickly, and during that time she had grown up considerably. She was finally 2 years and 1 month old. She went to the fireplace and started throwing the invitations and letters that the mages had sent her into the fire, wondering if they had gotten tired of it. Adele then picked her up in her arms and asked her what they were going to play today. The little girl replied that she wanted to lie down. Putting her in her crib, the girl smiled and said that Her Highness had spent all day yesterday on the bed as well. Nicephorus replied that she liked it. Taking out the papers, she noted that they were all wrinkled now. It would be necessary to ask to have them rewritten. All this time, she had studied them very diligently, and everything related to the demise of the Atlantis Empire was written there. In all her life, she had never seen such a huge wave that could swallow an entire country. The sea, at that moment, seemed like a giant, angry monster. All their accomplishments were destroyed in the blink of an eye. When it was time to go underwater, the sea would slowly cover the empire, but here was a huge wave that demolished everything in its path. The girl had read it countless times and couldn't even imagine this horrifying scene. It also said how sorry the first emperor of Kortan was. He talked about how he was a simple man, so he was not destined to learn more. He had already sinned, and nothing could be taken back. Could it be because of his sin that the sea had decided to destroy everything? Nicephorus decided that this part was not important, so we could skip it. But after the words of regret written by the emperor, the most interesting part began. Rereading it all, she felt the same feelings that she had felt the first time she read it. They were feelings of shock, anger, and despair. So she must see this passage again. It said that what he feared more than anything else in the world was that, but after that there was a huge triplet and one word, never mind. The little girl was angry that he hadn't finished what he wanted to write. After that heavy sentence, the man described what he did after Atlantis died. The Atlanteans had to get used to life on Earth, and for people who had no one to rely on, he created a new faith, counting on it to perpetuate their memory of Atlantis. The girl did not understand what kind of faith he had created, for now the god of Earth was worshipped in the sanctuary of Ramath. He had sealed her in magic chains, and after that he wanted to perpetuate the memory of Atlantis, but she was Atlantis. The baby started to freak out, and Adele worriedly asked if she was okay. Maybe she wanted a refreshing juice. It seemed to the girl that she was loading the maid too much. When she heard someone enter the room, she was surprised that Adele had returned so quickly, but it was her older brother who asked Riley if she was only blithely idle today. Nicephore asked why Heberg was here. He was always busy. She thought to herself that even after he became a duke, he always came as soon as he had a free moment. Sitting down in the chair, the young man said that he had read a very popular book about children, and it was written that this age is very important in the life of a child. Then he handed her a palette with colors and told her to play with it because it would help to increase the level of receptivity. The baby looked at it and did not understand how she should use it. But then she soaked her hand in the paint and touched her big brother's cheek. Adele caught this cute picture and asked if Her Highness had been playing with the paint, because now she needed to wipe her hands. But the little girl said she didn't need to. Then the little girl smelled hot chocolate and began to laugh loudly from the fact that Heberg was drinking it. The young man looked at her with a serious look and asked what was so strange about drinking hot chocolate. She continued to laugh, thinking to herself that he had a sweet tooth, and his taste didn't match his looks at all. It was very strange that Nathaniel didn't like sweets, since he was more suited to this kind of thing. His brother added that today the little girl was capricious. Maybe she wanted to know something. He had a minute to spare and could easily answer her questions. She thought to herself that she wanted to know information about Atlantis and the first emperor, but Heberg didn't know anything about it. But then it dawned on her that she still wanted to know something and asked about the previous Empress, because her death was not written anywhere, but surely her brother must know something about it. But noticing their concerned faces, the little girl thought that she had asked something she should not have asked. The maid turned to Her Highness and said she needed to be changed. Nicephorus didn't understand why at first, but then she noticed her dress was covered in paint and couldn't understand when she had gotten so dirty. When she noticed the silence that followed her question, she was convinced that she had asked something forbidden. But Adele decided to say that she would be better off not mentioning the previous Empress. It was a very painful memory for them, not only for the Emperor and Scion, but also for all of them. Crying, the maid added that her mother, Lady Ninnis, considered the previous Empress as her elder sister. After what happened, she even stopped eating and drinking. This event was simply shocking, but it was very hard for everyone to see Madame Ninnis's condition. The girl now understood why they were so upset about her question, so she exclaimed that she didn't know and thanked Adele for telling her. Adele then said that when they talked about Mrs. Ninnis, she remembered her words that she had asked her to tell the girl. It would certainly be nice if she could say them in person, but did she have nothing against that if she passed them on in her stead? Tiny replied that she didn't mind, and then the woman said that those who were born with the power of a sea dragon had a painful attachment. The previous empress felt this for her lover and the current emperor for his sister. This obsession could manifest as friendship, crush, or familial love. The little girl didn't understand why the maid decided to tell her all this. After that, Adele said that she would now speak in Ninnis's words. When the crown prince starts to get attached to her, there is no need to resist, because she is able to cure his ailment, so it is impossible not to get attached to her. There is an age difference between them, so he will consider her as his little sister. Will she be able to become part of his family for the sake of the people? Her mother wants her, as befits a dragon princess, to approach her duties with great responsibility. Then the maid added that she thinks the prince is already attached to her, because he visits her every day. Our heroine thought to herself that she had never seen her mother, but she could imagine what kind of person she was. First of all, she thought about the desires of the people, and then about their own. Being an aristocrat, she tried to fulfill all the duties that were assigned to her. The little girl really liked such people, so exclaimed that she was marvelous. Adele confirmed that she was a wonderful person and always tried to keep her safe and protect her. Heberg exclaimed that he didn't even want to imagine his sister becoming one family with the crown prince. Babe stated that Zion was stronger than Heiberg, if that was why he didn't like him. The young man replied that he didn't, and next time he would bring something that could keep her little mouth busy to keep her from saying stupid things. A few days later, our heroine was at a tea party with the crown prince. When the boy called her foe, the girl began to freak out and said that he should not call her that, because she did not like it. She thought to herself that Nathaniel had invented this stupid nickname for her. and now everyone addressed the great Empress as a child. Sion asked confusedly what he should call her, so that it would be a name that only he could say. He then suggested the name Nikki and asked if she liked it. After a little thought, our heroine replied that she liked it and agreed. Then the boy looked at her in such a way that it became uncomfortable and called her his Nikki. The girl thought to herself that things were getting a little dangerous. What would happen if he then decided not to let her go? She was here to break the curse. Zion should find another lover. Then decided that before she leaves this palace, the babe must get to the secret library, so exclaimed its name. The boy said that in the future, when they became husband and wife and the girl became Empress, she could even live there. The little girl began to think to herself that it was too long to wait, but then the boy said that he had brought a present for her. After that, he handed her a box which contained a precious stone, which was called the Sleeping Nymph. Nicephore thought about the fact that it was in such good condition, even though it was at least 500 years old. Those close to the element of water could make a contract with the nymph, and with the power, one would be able to breathe underwater for a certain amount of time. The crown prince exclaimed that he was sure she could awaken her. The girl noted to herself that she didn't really need the ability to breathe underwater, but water fairies had a lot of information, so it would be useful to her anyway. Nicephore concentrated and began to try to awaken her, mentally addressing the nymph and saying that if she wanted something, let her speak and the little girl would fulfill her request. The water fairy replied to find her pair and wake her up. Her half is inside the stone. Some people did it on purpose. The little girl had been sealed for over 1,000 years, so she knew exactly what it was like to be locked up. Once she meets these people, she won't let it go. She knows very well what a sealing spell is. The nymph replied that if the girl managed to find her pair, she would tell her everything in detail. Nicephore thought to herself that no matter how much time and money it took, she would surely find her pair to learn about the spell she needed. The little girl then exclaimed where Zion had found it. The boy replied that he bought it at an auction. The girl replied that it was only half of it. In order for it to work, a pair was needed and there could be more than one. Zion said that in that case, it was necessary to collect as many as possible. And just at this moment, the largest auction in the world had opened, but it was only held at night, not during the day. Afterward, the crown prince asked if she wanted to go along with him. The little girl exclaimed that, of course, for she must surely find a pair of water fairies. After a while, sitting in the carriage, our heroine thought about the fact that the particles of one stone created in one place are called family parts. If someone wanted to seal a nymph, they would have no choice but to use a stone of a similar class. Finding a mate for this nymph would not be too difficult. If she managed to find an item with the same shape, species, and place of origin as his. Suddenly, Sion addressed her by name. The girl noted to herself that she barely recognized him, though even she had changed her appearance. The boy went on to say that Nathaniel and Heiberg would be arriving at the Pearl Palace in a few days. Maybe he had already told her that, but he thought that since they were already going there, they should buy a present for Nathaniel. The little girl was surprised and thought why, if her brother was going somewhere far away, but then decided that why not buy a gift, because she had a blank check from the emperor. After a while, they arrived at the place, and Sion said that there would be a lot of people at the auction. There would be guards watching them, of course, but let her still hold his hand tightly and not go anywhere. In the auction room, the boy handed her the binoculars and said that she could see everything much better that way, but then added that she'd better support him since they were very heavy. The little girl immediately started examining the stones and noted that number 9 looked pretty good. Meanwhile, the voice of the host came on and thanked everyone who had joined them today. Let the last day of the auction begin, and he hoped that everyone present would spare no expense. Nicephore whispered in Sion's ear that she wanted the number 9 stone. The boy replied that was fine, but it was still a long way off, so she could take a nap for now. Our heroine was going to stand firm and replied that she didn't want to sleep, but then she realized that she was in a child's body, so she really wanted to sleep. She closed her eyes for a minute and woke up abruptly when the next number 9 was announced. That meant it was her turn. The crown prince told her not to worry about the money and just bet. Everyone present started to fight and raised the price higher and higher. Suddenly, our heroine noticed one person and realized that she had seen him somewhere before. It was a subordinate of the Crown Prince of Roxborough, and apparently he also wanted to get the thing under the 9th number. She was surprised that one of Roxborough's men needed the same stone as they did. Apparently he had learned its importance from somewhere. The boy suggested that we waste no time and make the biggest bid. After a while, our heroine, with a satisfied expression on her face, held the cherished number 9 in her hands and said that she knew they would succeed. The crown prince asked if she wanted anything else. The girl replied that yes, there were a few things in mind. He replied that was good, and now more stones should appear. And just then exactly what they needed appeared. It was the right pair for the nymph. Nicephorus remarked to herself that she was just incredibly lucky, and now she was going to make the biggest bet again. Meanwhile, Roxborough's subordinate paced nervously from side to side and thought to himself that if it weren't for this little one, he would have succeeded. The king had ordered this man to find an incredible gemstone worth hundreds or even thousands of ordinary stones. And that gem, number 9, was the best of all the others. If he only knew that such a gem would appear, he wouldn't waste money on all the others. He doesn't even have time to deal with the gems he's already bought. Everything has gone to shit, so we'll have to get rid of those kids. Suddenly, a young man's voice rang out asking who he was going to get rid of. Then he said that the crown prince had ordered him to find out everything about the recent gem buyers. At that very moment, he realized that he would return to his master empty-handed, without any of the gems he had spent a fortune on. The next day, the little girl sat contentedly by the jewelry. The stones she had bought were so large that she had managed to make exactly 4 brooches. No matter how far away from each other they were, all the owners of these things would always be able to feel each other's condition thanks to them. If one of them gets hurt, all the brooches will turn scarlet. A couple of nymphs appeared near the little girl whom she had freed, and the girl decided to ask them a question about the seal that was imposed on her. After all, it was already time to tell her everything. They explained that this seal of time and rebirth, at one particular moment, it would remove itself and allow reincarnation. Tiny asked if this meant that the loved ones who had betrayed her had not been able to kill her then, precisely because of this seal. The water fairies answered that she hadn't lost her memories and hadn't lost herself, and that was a feature of a sealed person. To top it all off, she had a strong protection spell on her that kept her safe from outside evil. Nicephor thought to herself that nymphs can't lie, and neither can the sea, so it must all be true. But it still felt more like a lie than anything else, since Kortan and Doom had betrayed her. What other rebirth with protection? The nymphs replied that there was no doubt of this seal's intent. Our heroine began to remember how they both told her that no matter what happened, they would never leave her, after which they would clarify if Her Majesty believed them. The little girl started to have the thought that they did it all for her good, but then brushed it all aside. After all, they were traitors anyway. It didn't matter what kind of sorcery was used. Her former loved ones explained nothing to her and put a seal on it. They didn't want to understand her at all and weren't on her side at all. She would never forgive them. A while later, Nathaniel stopped by to visit her and asked if she was okay. The little girl asked where Heiberg was. He replied that he had some business in the province, so he would be back a little later. Her brother took her in his arms and said that he didn't want to leave, and that it was hard for him to leave her here all alone, and that when he came back, the baby would be older. Baby asked how far away he was going. Nathaniel replied that it's a winter exercise, so he's going to the pole. Each high-ranking family has to send a representative, but since his older brother is a duke, he has to go. The girl thought to herself that she would rather go herself, but unfortunately she is still a little girl. The brother exclaimed that there's no need to worry because everything will be fine. They're all going about their normal routine. On top of that, they'll have mages with them. His sister handed him one of her handmade precious brooches. The young man thanked her and exclaimed that he had gotten a gift from his little sister. It was very special and important to him. Our heroine knew that it was useless to trust others, but she cannot deny her affection for this guy. She made him promise to always carry her with her, as she would feel more comfortable that way. Nathaniel replied that she would always be with him. Nathaniel picked her up in his arms again and started to make her feel fussy and asked her if she wanted to be like her big brother. The girl thought to herself, what a big brother if he knew how old she really was. But then she pressed herself against him and asked him to be careful. Otherwise, she would be very angry. Her brother promised her to be careful. A few days later, our heroine was angry that the emperor was supposed to come to her at 10 o'clock, and it was almost 12 o'clock. Screaming, Bavoki wanted to run into the room, but slipped and fell. Another maid stepped over her and headed toward the little girl. The girl reported that the emperor's attendant knight, Lucas, was approaching here, but for what reason she did not know. Suddenly, a young man appeared in the room and greeted the princess, and Bavoki was very frightened by the surprise. The little girl immediately snorted that apparently he had come to make up excuses for the emperor's tardiness. But the young man seriously reported that the crown prince was having a very severe attack of insanity. On the way out, Lucas reported that this attack had started 2 hours ago, and it was much stronger than usual. The boy was not getting any better. Nicefor nervously asked why she hadn't been called earlier. The boy replied that they thought that this attack would be less dangerous. That was why they had called her so late. The girl asked worriedly how Sion was now and if he was all right. The boy replied that he was a little better now, but the entire backyard was completely trashed. Seeing the crown prince in the room, the little girl immediately rushed to him and started asking him how he was feeling and if he was feeling bad. Sion replied that he was fine now that she was by his side. The boy was getting bad again, and our heroine did not understand why, after all, they had a resonance. So why is it not getting better now? The girl exclaimed if there was any medicine. One of the men replied that during attacks they do not help at all. Tiny thought that she just had to help him because there must be a way and suddenly remembered about touching. It was written in the book that resonance works much better with touch, after which she kissed him on the cheek. Then she thought that since she was doing it anyway, she would take the opportunity to make him feel much better and started kissing him on all sides. The boy immediately felt better, and our heroine couldn't believe that the power of the kiss was so great. He thanked her and told her that she was his angel of happiness and good luck, then apologized for making her feel so bad. Our heroine exhaled and said she was very glad he was finally feeling better. The little girl took his hand and added that she would become his family, so if he felt bad again, he should just tell her. The crown prince replied that he was very pleased and he would definitely report everything to her, because they were now one family. After a while, the emperor asked when the little girl would finally stop being angry. After all, she has a look of extreme dissatisfaction. Our heroine thought to herself that she was almost not angry, but he was late after all. Agrio asked what he could do to make her stop being angry with him. Tiny reached forward and said let him give her money, 100 gold coins for a second of her precious time. His Majesty was indignant. What kind of an attitude is this? It's not like she's a moneylender, and why is she so articulate about everything involving money? The little girl made a frustrated look on her face and said that he made her sad and she was waiting for him so much. Gold would help remedy that situation a little. The emperor grabbed his head and replied that he couldn't just waste the state treasury. Then he asked if he could give her a gift. For example, a beautiful boat so that she could always play on the water. He would put a spell on it and the boat would never sink. The girl liked this idea very much because, together with it, she would be able to go to the sea often. Then she said she didn't need any spells and thought that if the boat overturned, she would be able to splash around in the water. Meanwhile, Sion was reflecting on the fact that it was good that everything had gone according to his plan. Sometimes it wasn't bad at all to go out of one's way intentionally. Even though the emperor is his uncle, he can't let him spend much time alone with Nikki. The prince was reminded of his mother's words that one day he too will have something that will belong only to him. Nikki would belong only to him, and he would not let anyone take her away from him. A few days later, it was time for Nathaniel to leave for his training, which would last from 6 to 12 months. And since many wizards are able to cast spells, they can prevent possible accidents and attacks. Seeing her brother, the little girl asked him to come closer. The young man began to wonder what she wanted from him, whether to kiss him goodbye or just to see how cool he was up close. The girl snuggled up to him and thought that she had been building up her strength for this day to cast a spell on him. No matter how hard it was for him, there was no way his heart would stop. To solidify the effect, she kissed his cheek and told him to be careful. The guy wasn't expecting that, so he pulled the little girl even tighter against him and said he felt like he had the whole world at his feet. Heberg told him to be careful and not to cause trouble. Nathaniel replied that he shouldn't worry. He better let him keep a good eye on their little sister. He then waved goodbye to everyone and said that it was time for him to hit the road. The little girl didn't even want to think that she wouldn't see him for so long, but in any case he would be back in a year at the most. Her older brother held her close to him and told her she could cry if she really wanted to. There was nothing wrong with that. 5 years have passed since then. Our heroine thought about what had happened, the worst thing that could ever happen to a 7-year-old child. But her thoughts were interrupted as she suddenly found a poisonous needle. The older she got, the more annoyed she became with the whole thing. After all, the poison doesn't work on her anyway. It's originally a liquid. After that, she ordered all the servants to come to her about 3. Then she began to say that they were all extremely unworthy people, Trying to kill a poor little child like her is very despicable. She strangled them with magic power and filled their kind with water. Then she asked them if they had any conscience at all. Let them at least say, "Sorry, please." The girl started to get angry that they decided to ignore her order, but she noticed that they silently waved their hands and showed that they were begging for mercy. Suddenly it dawned on her that she had forbidden them to speak, and they had no way to do so because of the water. She loosened her grip a little and demanded that they repeat what she had told them. The servants immediately began to apologize. When she got closer to them, she said that there were some things that were better left out. She thought to herself that it was good that she was already 7 years old, and it was easier to use the power of the sea. After that, she smiled sweetly and said that they would be sentenced to death for trying to kill the dragon princess, but they were just doing their job and the real customers were guilty. The fact that they are novice killers can be used, so first she will just throw them in the dungeon. A while later, she noticed that it was already 9 o'clock, which meant that Scion would be coming soon. Hearing the sound of footsteps, the girl realized that he was approaching her bedroom. But he usually came at 9:30, so why did he come so early today? She started running around the room and worried that he would definitely be nervous if he knew that she had dealt with the killers herself. On top of that, he might get really angry. So she couldn't think of anything better than just pretending to be asleep. The young man sat on the edge of her bed and told her that he had arrived. He then asked what had already happened. Nicephorus replied that she didn't know. The boy clarified that she was not the one who sent those murderers to prison. Our heroine replied that she had no idea what he was talking about. The young man began to get upset that she still did not trust him. The girl thought to herself that it was urgent to translate the topic, so she asked why he came so early today, because it was only 9 o'clock. Scion explained that there was a big meeting today, and the topic would be discussed at the meeting. They would be discussing whether to continue the search for the missing during the winter exercise. The girl remembered that she had not finished her morning thought that the worst thing that could happen to a 7-year-old child was that her family had become part of the winter exercise because Nathaniel had not returned after 5 years. There was a faction among the aristocrats that did not support the current emperor. They were opposed to the continuation of the investigation. Their argument is that all previous attempts have been an utter failure. Our heroine asked if they still have anything against this search. Scion replied that the first and second search parties returned with nothing at all, so they don't want to waste resources. The girl was very angry and said that aristocrats are terrible people. They only do everything against the emperor's will. How could they be so insensitive when even their family members were at this exercise? The young man explained that they always sent illegitimate children or offspring that they felt didn't have much potential to attend these drills. The little girl realized that this was probably why they didn't want to spend money on the search. She thought to herself that she didn't know what their feelings were, but Nathaniel was very important to her. The crown prince suggested breakfast first. Surely Nikki must be hungry. At the table, the little girl thought about the fact that her brooch was still in order, which meant that Nathaniel was still alive. She didn't understand how she could not go looking for him. She clutched the fork too tightly out of anger, and it just bent in her hands. The babe noted that the blood of fairies flowed in it, and apparently it had gotten too strong. Scion asked fearfully if she was all right, for she had almost hurt herself. Nicephor replied that she was fine, for it was the fork, not her, that had gotten hurt. The prince exclaimed that since the fork was gone, he would feed her himself. Tiny couldn't help but think that with the help of the sea giants, they would have easily been able to find her brother. Nicephor wondered if the secret library had information about sea giants. She asked the prince if she could go there since she was already 7 years old. The boy replied that it was unlikely. After all, for that she has to marry him and become an empress. The little girl exclaimed that then it was necessary to marry right now. The prince replied that he wasn't emperor yet, so it wouldn't work. Only the emperor, empress, and crown prince can officially enter there. The little girl had already asked Scion this question over 100 times, but his answer was always the same. She even thought of sneaking into the secret library. But there are serious spells on her front door, and if she can't break them, it must be Kortan's doing. She was getting more and more curious every day about what he wanted to hide there. The prince added that if he allowed her to go in there, the aristocratic faction would make a fuss. It was as if the crown prince was meddling in the affairs of the empire and was in cahoots with the little dragon princess. The little girl exclaimed that in such a case it was necessary to do something incredible. somehow distinguish herself in their eyes, so that the aristocrats would not even dare to open their mouths, and as a reward, demand access to the secret library. After that, she wondered what could be done. The young man patted her on the head and told her she was a good girl. He would see if she could help at the meeting. It dawned on the little girl that the meeting was very soon, so she started pushing the prince out of the room to go there as soon as possible. After a while, the little girl went down to the prisoners and noted that they were behaving themselves. Then she asked if any of them wanted to die in the dungeon or if they would prefer life. She then exclaimed that she had a good heart, so she could spare them if they officially became the castle's assassins. The men were confused and asked what official meant, if this was some kind of torture. Our heroine replied that no, it's an official position. They will even be paid overtime at night and weekends. The castle has specially created these positions for them. The mercenaries didn't understand what the catch was, but gently asked if they would have a salary. Our heroine replied that given the danger of the job, the salary would be 500 gold per month. But if they had even the thought of betraying her, they would immediately go to the shark food. The men began to bow and say that they agreed to everything and they didn't really want to kill her. It was all on behalf of the Crescent Moons. It's the largest assassination ring in the Empire. Despite an active investigation led by the Emperor, the true goals and motives of the organization have yet to be revealed. It seems the young men they caught last time were also from the Crescent Moon, and the guys also wanted to kill her. She then said that it didn't matter because they were obligated to serve her anyway. Then stated that she had the first order for them. Let them tell her where their main headquarters is. After a while, our heroine found herself in some alley, because at the age of 5 years she had learned to escape from the palace. Stopping in front of some doors, the mercenary said that in the depths of this store of gold coins, there is a workshop. It was there that they received their order. The man who opened the door said that it was not a place for children and the girl should not go in there, but she did not listen to anyone. Her subordinates immediately surrounded him with their swords and told her to go on ahead and not worry about anything. They may not be the best at contract killing, but they fight excellently. Nicephore thought to herself that they were already starting to earn their 500 gold pieces. Opening one of the doors, she saw a group of assassins wondering who the girl was and who let her in. Smiling, the little girl stated that she had a couple questions for them. The intruders replied that they were very scary uncles, so let her come back later when she got off her mom's breast. Starting to use her magical abilities, our heroine replied that she would love to, but unfortunately her mom is already dead. An unknown force began to choke each of the men so that they couldn't even take a breath. Grabbing one of them firmly by the hair, the little girl asked if they knew the half-men. A while later, our heroine thought about how she had gotten this far and it was no use. The mercenaries told her the following: the half-moon did seek out assassins through intermediaries. However, even the intermediaries did not know who exactly was behind the crescent moon. When they want to contact someone, they don't send letters, they don't send people, they just pass by on the street and discreetly pass the order. It all looks absolutely pointless and confusing. In the end, even if she finds more middlemen, they still can't tell her anything. After all, they don't know the true face of the crescent moon. It would be nice to see exactly how they come into contact with the intermediaries, but it's unlikely to be resolved so easily. Meanwhile, in the imperial palace, they were preparing for the General Assembly, which is held every 3 months and must be attended by all the influential aristocrats of the empire. These are the heads of families and their heirs or aristocrats without their own estates, but with great influence in the imperial castle. There are 333 people in total, and ever since they gathered, all the talk has only been about the dragon princess. One of the men exclaimed that the girl was already a full 7 years old, but the crown prince's fortune so far had changed absolutely nothing. The others began to doubt that the prophecy was true, but they had hoped that the dragon princess would help him overcome his madness. One of those present suggested that she simply wasn't a real dragon princess. After all, the girl mentioned in the prophecy would surely be able to do this. One of the women exclaimed that she thought it was inappropriate to say that now, since the princess was only 7 years old. Others supported her and said that she was born with a great prophecy. However, right now she is still young with all of them, so they should wait a little while. This whole thing doesn't even require an oath. The man said that it is impossible to ignore the fact that Roxborough is gathering forces. If they invade after 10 years, will they also say that the princess is still quite young and not strong enough? After meeting the Dragon Princess, the Crown Prince of Roxborough did not show his face in the Empire. It could be considered that the child's pride was hurt. But is that really the case? If they are really up to something, the prince needs to get rid of the madness as soon as possible. However, the princess, who is supposed to supposedly cure the prince's illness, does not even appear in public, thus demonstrating a complete lack of good manners. If she is the real dragon princess, then why is she behaving in such a manner? Heiberg entered the hall and said that this man seems to be having a lot of fun here. Let him repeat his words in front of him. After all, he was just discussing his younger sister's condition. Some of the aristocrats were horrified at the use of the first name. He may be a Rhys-on, but he must still respect the chain of command. Heiberg continued that some might think she was calling herself a dragon princess on purpose. If the man thinks she is a fake, then just let him bring the real princess. If not, then let him shut his mouth. The man noted that the Duke seems to be out of his mind with anger. He is well aware that the young man does not want such rumors about his family, whose members are already few. The young man replied that he could consider it as he pleased. He has absolutely no concern about it. Some people present picked up on the fact that this is absolutely true. There was no need to pay attention to what Duke Garrett said. Suddenly, a hologram of Agrio and the Crown Prince appeared in the imperial chairs. The aristocrats noted that no matter how many times they had witnessed something like this, it still never ceased to amaze them. The power of the sea dragon separates a piece of consciousness and can betray its form without the deed itself. His Majesty announced that right now they would begin the 10,942nd General Assembly. Meanwhile, Bavoki and our heroine were strolling along the beach. The girl picked up a seashell and said that she was very beautiful, just like a princess, after which she tripped and fell face down. The little girl didn't understand how she became a maid in the imperial palace. She talked about how she was just lucky to get the job, but just how much luck it must have been. Tiny was just beginning to reflect on the meeting that had begun when the sea pelted her with water from head to toe. The maid exclaimed that she was all wet, needed to change her clothes quickly because she might get sick. The girl replied that it was all right, because it was summer. The girl exclaimed that if she got a runny nose, Mrs. Adele would kill her. Therefore, it was necessary to go quickly. The little girl said goodbye to the sea and said she would play with it tomorrow. Bavoki reveled that she was talking to the sea. Our heroine thought to herself that she couldn't tell that they could really talk. On the way, they met Heiberg and Sion. The latter exclaimed that Nikki was all wet through. The girl explained that they had been playing on the sea and asked if the meeting was over already. The boy replied that she had better take a hot bath first, and then he would tell her the good news after she returned. The girl was glad that the news was good. Apparently, they had found a way to find Nathaniel after all. After a while, they sat down to breakfast together, and the little girl asked what the good news was. The boy saw that she was soiled and began to wipe her face with a napkin. After that, he said that Mr. Rhys-on could also stay and listen. Our heroine thought to herself that their relationship still left a lot to be desired. In any case, something incredible was discussed at today's meeting. Let the girl is not surprised, but the ruins of sea giants were discovered. Looking at Nesifor's reaction, the guy stated that she knew who they were. The little girl thought to herself that she had even met them before. When Atlantis still existed, many races lived together in the sea. One of them were the sea giants. Usually their lifespan was around 200 years, but the chiefs lived to 500. However, because of their long life, they left almost no offspring, and therefore became extinct by the current time. But the news of the ruins the girl had found made her feel strange, for she did not think there was anything left. Sion added that, first of all, a huge path was found, and they also found stone pillars with unknown symbols. It might have been a temple, but they don't know for sure since there aren't many records left about them. That's why this is such an important discovery. The little girl noted to herself that Atlantis is something unbelievable for modern people. If they find other magical items from that time, they will definitely sell them for a huge sum. Of course, many of them are found by the imperial family and belong to them, but are there valuables that the dynasty has not found? There is a chance of finding 10 items that have ancient sea giant spells on them. The Crown Prince said that he recommended the Rhys-on family as assistants to the ruins exploration team. The little girl exclaimed happily that she could join too, since they wouldn't find a translator like her, then thought she would try to find and get all her things. If they couldn't send a third search party for lack of money, then she would earn it herself. A few days later, they would reach the ruins as the next team of explorers. If they traveled by carriage, it would take about 10 days, but if they used the portal, it would all last about 5 minutes. The little girl started to get nervous as to why they were still in the carriage. After all, couldn't they get out already? Bavaki explained that they couldn't yet, for she said it was very dangerous for now. Our heroine thought about you that everyone was worrying too much about her. Tiny remembered Scion saying that outside the castle, the chance of being attacked by brigands increases, so it could be very dangerous. Nicephorus replied that she wasn't worried about that and would go anyway. The ruins were found on the coast where no man has set foot for a long time. Strong winds blow there and a rough sea rages, so it's a great place to attack. The girl noted that he was right, for ordinary people would have thought it so. Nymphs began to hover around her, telling her not to worry, for she had them. Sion said that unfortunately he would not be able to go with them because he needed to guard the castle, so she would have to tell him absolutely everything, and if anything seemed strange to her, she would have to be very careful. If anything dangerous appears, she should just leave Mr. Rizion alone and run away. At last the carriage moved, and looking out of the window, our heroine thought that she wondered how many ruins had been discovered, and whether 6 days and 5 nights would be enough for her to see everything. After a while they arrived at the site, and they were all marveled at the landscape that appeared before their eyes. The emperor asked one of his subordinates how things were. The man replied that they had managed to decipher 1 stone. The little girl was outraged that such a large number of people, over such a long period of time, had only been able to decipher 1 stone. Agrio then asked her to show him what they had managed to translate. The little girl went in a completely different direction and thought that he must have thought she would follow him, but she did not. The maid asked where she was headed. The little girl replied that they should take a good look around there, in case they hadn't found anything yet. She thought to herself that, for example, the treasure, so she should go to look for it. Once near one of the rooms, the girl noted that it seems to have already been there. Then it dawned on her that she had been there many times with Dum when she was still Empress. They had visited the distant marketplace of sea giants. There was something they needed to buy. The young man said that there was also a sea giant market near the capital, so why had they traveled so far? The girl replied that they just hadn't walked for a long time. Then she grabbed her stomach and said that it seems that she ate something wrong, so she would go for a walk and they would meet in a few hours. Looking after Teresa, Doom didn't understand why a person with a stomachache would want to go for a walk. The little girl couldn't remember what she wanted to buy, but it was definitely an item enchanted by the sea giants. Among the artifacts that belong to the giants, there are often items for protection, because in those days there were frequent attacks. First, you need to find the place where the defense and jewelry store was. If there was anything left, she would take it for herself, and if she was lucky, she would find something very valuable indeed. The little girl yanked Adele by the hem and said she should try to go inside. The woman objected that it was a historic place, and if they broke anything, it would be a big disaster. Nicephor replied that it would be all right, for they were only looking. But suddenly guards appeared and told the girl that she was not allowed to go inside. Adele asked menacingly how dare they block the way of the great dragon princess. They only want to have a look around, so there is no need to obstruct them. The young men bowed and apologized for not recognizing her highness, so let them pass. As the young men looked after them, they admired the little girl and said that it was as if they had seen a fairy. It would be necessary to brag to everyone or just leave this moment just for them. Looking around the ruins, the maids thought it was amazing because everything was so huge, and how could it be possible? They really hope it doesn't collapse. Our heroine explained that these things were originally set on the ground, not the seabed, so nothing would collapse. She then decided it was time to get down to business and mentally asked the nymph if there were any magical items there. After assessing the situation, the water fairies answered that there was nothing because absolutely everything had been taken away. The little girl noted to herself that it was a pity, but thanks to the nymphs, she could secretly find jewelry. And they can do something else. It's the ability to absorb everything and store it inside them. Tiny nymphs could store something as big as the puddle or pond they were born in. Who would have thought her first attempt would be such a failure? Where could she find the jewels faster? Suddenly there was a scream, and Adele announced that she had found a secret staircase, but Bavoki had fallen through there. Looking down, our heroine noted that it was hardly a secret staircase. It looked more like an entrance for lowly guests, but why was it that way? Adele worriedly asked how Bavaki was feeling down there, but the girl replied that she was perfectly fine. When she got to the top, Nisfor noted that she didn't have a scratch on her, but shouldn't she have hurt herself during the fall? The entrance is quite deep. A normal person would easily get some injuries, but she has absolutely no injuries and looks fine. Bavoki is very clumsy and was always falling or breaking things, but here it was the opposite. She then decided to push those thoughts away and not think about things that didn't matter at the moment. Maybe she was just lucky today and it was good that her maid didn't hurt herself. The little girl exclaimed that there didn't seem to be anything else for them to do there and started thinking about where to go next. They began to look around, and the girl thought disappointedly that it was really empty and there was absolutely nothing. Then she exclaimed that they would only go to one more place and that would be the end of it. Adele argued that the place had no guards and maybe they should not go there alone. Then she asked the guard why it wasn't guarded. The young man explained that they couldn't enter the place, so they were told not to guard it. Our heroine noted to herself that there must be something there and she smells money. If they can't get in because they can't open the door, they just need to find another entrance. Stopping near another door, she thought that this could be the place, but just first they need to get out. Using her magical powers, the girl used the water to wash away the cobwebs and centuries of dust. Now, it was simply necessary to open it, but pushing the door there was no reaction. Adele started to offer her help and said that maybe she should try it, but the princess said to wait. Most likely there is a spell on this place, that's why this door won't open. So it was necessary to use her powers. Suddenly a sign appeared on the door saying that you need to use your powers to fight and win. The little girl didn't realize who she had to fight. Maybe with this building. After she entered this place, she felt its energy. The nymphs explained that she needed more energy than the building had. That was the only way she would be able to enter. The little girl realized that it would be very difficult and ordered Adele to stop anyone who tried to stop her. The guards started to panic and talk about how no one can go in there. It's very dangerous in there. She might hurt herself and she won't be able to do anything at all. Our heroine took it as a challenge and gathered her strength and opened the door. While the guards stood in shock, the girl told Adele to hold them back while she went inside. When she went in, she saw that there was a treasure of sea giants. Taking one of the rings, the girl noted that one of the symbols of ancient Atlantis was that the sea giants were excellent craftsmen of fine craftsmanship. The second symbol, however, was that they also liked to make absolutely useless things. The nymphs looking at the jewelry said that they had spells on them. For example, one had one on it that helped take away other people's food, and the earrings only said the wrong answers. The little girl pointed out that it didn't matter what spells were put on them, because they were ancient anyway. She could sell them for more. Suddenly, her older brother and the emperor appeared and said that she wasn't going to accidentally take it all for herself. The little girl resentfully exclaimed that she wasn't, because she just wanted to look around and then call everyone else. The emperor said that there were a lot of strange things there. The girl replied that they were not just objects, but real treasures. And it was she who had found it all. Wasn't that surprising? Only a dragon princess could open that door, and since she found it, the treasure must belong to her. If not, she'll just close the door and never open it again. The mages objected that all these items looked like real cultural heritage, so they couldn't be allowed to be missed. After a little thought, the emperor said what would happen if he allowed her to keep what was in her hands. She had discovered the treasure trove, so deserved to have it. Our heroine marveled that His Majesty had fallen for her blackmail so easily. The mages objected that these things are just incredibly important and you can't do that. The young man became angry and hissed that in that case, why didn't they come here and discover it themselves, but could only decipher one stone pillar? Everyone present bowed their heads and apologized. Our heroine thought that it was very strange that they couldn't decipher anything but one pillar, because at first glance they didn't seem particularly complicated. The emperor added that the young dragon princess was very good, because she was the one who found the place. The subordinate objected that she could have known in advance that this place contained treasures. The emperor started to get angry again and said that he never told her about it, or maybe he thought the kid was blabbing such important information everywhere. The young man bowed and apologized for his tactless behavior. The little girl even felt a little sorry for them, so she started thinking about preparing some kind of reward for them. Then she offered to decipher 10 stone pillars in return, or in 6 days and 5 nights, she could decipher absolutely everything. She thought to herself that she was already 7 years old, so she could start demonstrating her abilities. The mages were shocked and asked in amazement if she knew the language of the ancient sea giants. Nicephorus stated that if they didn't believe her, they could ask the great sage about everything. The boy and girl immediately replied that in that case she could take anything. Our heroine thought to herself that it was incredibly important for sages to decipher these stone pillars, which is something that can't be said about wizards. But it was a bit of a shame because if she had gone a little further, the nymphs would have helped her find something else. Then she began to think about how much money she could get if she sold it all. Then she turned to Nathaniel and asked him to wait a little longer, for soon she would send a third expedition to find him. The next day, the great sage told the princess that they had not seen each other for a long time. After a long exchange of letters, she and Ingenios had grown very close, so much so that she now addressed him by his nickname, Inga. The little girl exclaimed that he had gotten more wrinkles. The old man replied that it was because he hadn't seen her for a long time, and that was why he was sad. The little girl objected that they had only seen each other a few weeks ago. The man replied that an old man like him would like to see her as often as possible until his death. Our heroine thought to herself that he should not make her laugh, for he had at least 50 more years to live. Then Ingenios said that since the princess did not like to beat around the bush, it was necessary to get down to business. The girl began to read on the pole that at the wedding of Morpholina and Cadus, 50 rings and 38 gems were given as gifts. The sea giants handed out these gifts at the wedding for all their guests. She was then handed a book and asked if she could read this. The little girl replied that there were bad words written there. The wise men appreciated that it was now clear why they thought it was strange. After all, they thought that words of gratitude were written there, but if a bad word is written there, then everything fits together. Our heroine asked if they were now okay with her getting all this treasure. The boys exclaimed that, of course not. She could take whatever her heart desired. The girl noted to herself that this is wonderful, and now they officially belong to her, and therefore there should be no problems with the sale. Adele came up to our heroine with an umbrella and said that it seems that it's going to start raining soon. The man said it would be hard to do deciphering if it rained, so she could go rest. The little girl began to remember that it seemed to be the exact same weather that very day. She went up to Doom and apologized for waiting so long because she was looking for something and was late. The girl thought that should please Kortan. Nicephor thought that it didn't matter that it had rained that day either. She had remembered it for nothing at all, for it only made her sad. Suddenly, the emperor came up to her and said that she should stop frowning. It's not suitable for a little girl at all. At her age, it is better to run and jump on the puddles. Our heroine wondered why the emperor suddenly decided to speak to her. For her, his increased interest could be dangerous, so that before they communicated only thanks to Scion. The girl stated that she didn't want to pursue it. If he felt like it, however, he could jump in the puddles himself. His Highness replied that he didn't think playing in puddles suited his status. He then added that he had heard that she had hired some funny guys. As he realized it was all about finding Nathaniel, let her not worry, the guy would be sure to send a third search party. Babe replied that he's definitely alive and she knows it thanks to that brooch, so he will definitely be found. The young man replied that he had heard about it from Mr. Ricion. Then he asked her when she had found it in the first place. The girl answered that she had made it herself and gave it to him just in case. The emperor said that they were last seen in the polar region, but then they seemed to have vanished. Nicephorus replied that she could easily have found him, if only she had given up there. Suddenly something struck her, and she asked if the men had searched the seabed. After all, if the expedition had disappeared without a trace, perhaps they had fallen down and might be at the bottom. The young man replied that he didn't even know. After all, people will die if they end up on the seabed, as they cannot breathe underwater. Yes, and there were no traces of the shipwreck, so let him not worry. The girl thought about the fact that it seems to be true because even their ancestors could not breathe underwater. It seemed only she could do that. No one from the century she lived in was left alive anymore. Suddenly, one of his subordinates approached them and informed His Majesty that the cardinal from La Myrta had arrived. When the man went to meet him, our heroine handed him a jacket and said that he was such a slob because it was necessary to dress always neatly. The emperor patted her on the head and said that she was the only one who could tell His Highness that he was a slob. Then he said that since she was bored anyway, would she not like to go with him to meet the cardinal? On the way, our heroine noted that the rain had suddenly stopped for some reason. After a while, they met a representative from La Myrta and he greeted the emperor. Our heroine noted to herself that this priest looks a lot like Duma, but where is the cardinal himself? Heiberg explained that this is the cardinal. He just showed up in La Myrte one day. Despite his 11 years of age, the boy has excellent skills. He was able to stop the rain and made the sun shine again. The little girl was surprised that such a small boy could change the weather. The emperor then went to hand out instructions to his subordinates that they could go back to their work, and his brother informed him that it was time for him to go too. The boy introduced himself to our heroine and said that his name was Helio and he came from La Merta. He was sincerely happy to meet the dragon princess in person. Then the boy said that he had a candy and offered it to our heroine. The girl began to stretch her hands to it and thought only of why so much like doom. But suddenly, she was picked up by the emperor and the little girl screamed because she was in great pain. She beat him on his back with her fists and talked about asking him to control his power. Then he turned to Helio and said that if he was done with all his business, he could go back. After all, the emperor needs to control the excavation. The boy was very surprised that he was being sent back so quickly. His Majesty then asked Nicephorus if she would go with him on his business, but the girl shouted loudly that she would not. Then he began to put her down and told her not to be friends with that suspicious boy. The little girl thought to herself that what did he even care if she was friends with him or not? After the emperor left, the boy asked what the dragon princess's name was. The little girl answered that her name was Nicephor Riseyan. The boy said that he was very pleased to meet her and she could call him simply Helio. It dawned on our heroine that one must have special skills to become a cardinal at such a young age. So she said that if Helio wasn't too busy, would he like to go along with her? After that, they visited a few places together, and the little girl then realized that he was not at all good at navigating the terrain. After a moment, he disappeared again for the 4th time. When the girl found him after a while, she asked him that if he could not even find his way, why he had come here unaccompanied. The boy replied that the Holy Father had told him that he should learn to navigate by himself. The little girl noted that he seemed completely harmless, so it was silly to think he was like Doom. Helio added that she had to walk longer because of him, so if she wanted, he could do a blessing to relieve her fatigue. You could say it was his little trick. Then he pointed his staff at her and said that may the protection of La Merte be with Lady Nicephor. The girl noted that the fatigue really just like a hand removed, so she thanked him and offered to be his friend. She thought to herself that now she just wanted to receive the blessing much more often. The boy replied that he didn't mind being friends with her at all and added that her body was arranged in such a way that she perceived the blessing well. After all, not everyone takes it well. He usually can't give it to members of the imperial family as they get rejection. The girl thought that it could be because of the energy of the water element. Because the power of the sea dragon that the imperial family possesses causes their bodies to reject it. Maybe that's why they can't receive the blessing, and it's all because of that bastard Kortan. Suddenly the boy said that it was time for him to go back, for it was already evening, and he could not leave the temple for a long time. If she needed him, let her call for him at any time. As a friend, he would always be glad to help her. The girl replied that was fine, and then it was time to head back towards the camp. After a while, our heroine began to feel a familiar spiritual energy. She immediately ran to the tent and saw a hologram of Zion there. She exclaimed that she was surprised every time she saw him like that. She wondered how he was able to do that, for she was very envious. The prince replied that she could do it too when she was older. The boy asked how she was doing and if everything was all right, if something special was going on. After a little thought, the little girl exclaimed that she had made a new friend. The crown prince didn't like this and asked what kind of friend. Without noticing his reaction, Nicephor replied that her new friend had given her a blessing in order for her to regain her strength. She would introduce them a little later, then worriedly asked if there had been any new attacks during her absence from the palace. The crown prince replied that they had been in residence for a long time, so it was fine, but it seemed she would have a hard time when she returned back. The little girl waved her hand and said that it was nothing, everything was fine. She thought to herself that it would only end with a touch. Besides, it was Kortan's fault that Sion was suffering from the curse, so she should do her best to lessen his suffering. Suddenly they began to hear shouting from the street, and it became clear that everyone was looking for the little princess. Adele ran into them and informed them that a strange reaction suddenly came from the stone pillar, so she was told to bring her as soon as possible. The great sage went there first. The girl noted that since something strange had happened there, then she should go there with her older brother. Heberg also looked over and said that he was here, so she could safely go with him. After which he turned his attention to the crown prince and suggested that he should go along with them. Meanwhile, the guards didn't realize what was going on, and on top of that, there was suddenly a loud explosion. The torches immediately went out and they couldn't see anything at all. The older brother said that he would help them light them back up and would be back soon. The girl thought about the fact that the object that had caused the commotion seemed to have extinguished the torches. She asked the nymphs if they could see anything. The water fairies told her that the mercenaries had arrived and had decided to return again. Adele and Heiberg immediately came to her defense, and she thought it was good that they were with her. But suddenly she began to hear Bavoka screaming for Her Majesty or Adele to save her as soon as possible. Nicephore shifted that she had completely forgotten about her. She asked the nymphs if they could see anything, but they said they could not. Our heroine did not understand where Bavoka's voice was coming from. But suddenly the girl appeared safe and sound. The little girl thought that thank God that she was all right and she was not injured. After which she told Heiberg that they needed to head towards the explosion site. The closer they got, the stronger the smell of blood was. It seemed that something terrible had happened there. When they got to the very spot, they saw a great sage lying on the ground unconscious. The little girl did not understand what had happened to him, but her brother explained that Ing was examining the tablet when suddenly there was a powerful explosion. The girl realized that it seemed that he was cursed, and in order to cure the elder, it was necessary to destroy the tablet. After that, she approached it and decided to do it with the help of her magical abilities. But suddenly it all began to glow, and the girl did not understand what was happening until she noticed the inscriptions that began to appear. It was written that the great Empress of Atlantis is an eternal friend of the sea giants. Anyone who touches this stone will be cursed in an instant. Only she won't be affected by the spell because the tablet has a message for the girl. Let her build the Atlantis ship and find them. They are in the permafrost on a snow-white land where tears turn to ice flakes from the cold. The giants will be waiting for her there. From all that was written, the sea giants are still alive, and they are waiting for her to come to them. First, the curse must be lifted from Inga. The people present tried to block her way and told her not to come any closer because the curse could spread. But she told them to stand aside, for this wise man was her friend, so she must not leave him to die. The girl really wanted to help him, but she wasn't sure it would work. The crown prince appeared near her and calmed her down and told her that it was okay, because he was sure that she could break the spell. This gave the little girl confidence, and she, without wasting time, decided to use her magical abilities. But suddenly our heroine collapsed exhausted next to the great sage. Adele came to a complete horror and screamed that such a thing had happened to her. Heiberg calmed everyone down and said that everything was all right with her. She had just fallen asleep. The emperor said that the great sage was breathing, so have him taken to the infirmary. A while later, the little girl woke up abruptly in bed and screamed loudly for some reason. It scared Bavoki half to death. Adele immediately appeared in the room and exclaimed with relief that she was awake. After all, the girl was so worried that something would be wrong with her. After that, the woman burst into tears, and Nicephore asked why she was crying. The woman exclaimed that she could not even imagine how worried the maid was. If something had happened to her, she would not have survived it. The little girl stroked her head and said that nothing could happen to her, and everything was fine. Afterwards, she asked how Ing was feeling. The woman replied that the great sage was fine. He woke up about 3 hours ago and was very eager to meet her. The little girl stretched and thought that it was a shame that she had made many people worry, but she felt just fine after the power surge that had occurred for the first time in a long time. That tablet that had hurt Ing was most likely destroyed, and it definitely had a message on it from the sea giants that was addressed specifically to her. It was as if they were certain that she would see that tablet. But how could they know about it? It would only be possible to question them when she met them in person. To do so, she must build the ship Atlantis and travel to where the sea giants now live, namely the pole where Nathaniel disappeared. The next day, Adele shouted to our heroine that she must return to the palace as soon as possible, because it was too dangerous for Her Majesty there. On top of that, she needed to be examined by her personal physician. Our heroine thought to herself that she felt that her body was absolutely healthy, but it did not obey her. So she answered aloud that it was good, because she still needed to meet with Sion. The woman immediately exclaimed that she would start all the preparations to set off right away. As the girl got into the carriage, everyone present thanked her. If it were not for her, they could have lost the great sage, and he remained alive only thanks to her. Our heroine replied that she had only done what she had to do. Inga exclaimed that as expected, Her Majesty is very humble. He wants to thank her from the bottom of his heart. He is very much afraid of dying, though he is quite old. The girl replied that she did not want to lose the great sage, so he should live for at least 50 more years. Then she added that if he really wanted to thank her, he could help her with something. Have him help her with the fusion in the magic tower. The man was confused at first, but then asked how he could help her. The little girl whispered something in his ear, and the great sage agreed. Sometime later, Nicephore told Adele and Bwoki to go to the Pearly Palace, and she must first see Scion, for he was very anxious about her. It was the first time she had ever been separated from him for so long, and after all, his energy was so fickle. At the sight of her, George exclaimed how her majesties had come to be here. Nicephore asked him to be quiet because the crown prince didn't know she had arrived and the girl wanted to surprise him. The subordinate tried to stop her and told her that she shouldn't go in there without asking, but it was too late. Sion's irritated voice was heard and he said that he had asked her not to go in there, but the servant was fed up with his life. The girl saw him like that for the first time. It turns out he is very serious when he works. Seeing the little girl, the young man was surprised to ask when she had time to return, because according to the official schedule, she should arrive only tomorrow. Nicephore replied that she had come early because she missed him very much. The boy asked her to wait for a while he went to order something to eat. After a while, the prince asked if she got what she wanted from those ancient ruins. The girl answered that she had. Then she handed him a ring and told him it was a gift for him. This is the secret she spoke of, and she is giving it only to him. Let him try to use this power on the servants. This relic of the sea giants, and it has an interesting spell on it that will make any person who is near it bald. The young man replied that he would use it near the emperor, after which he thanked for the gift and said that he would keep it very carefully. But suddenly the crown prince changed in his face and asked what the scent was. The little girl began to sniff herself and did not understand what he was talking about, for she had not heard any odor. But Scion kept saying that someone had left their scent on her, and he was very curious as to who. Their conversation was interrupted by the servants, who said they had brought them something to eat. But the young man decided to stay on the subject and asked who was her new friend. The girl exclaimed that it was Helio. The young man clarified whether she meant the same Helio, who is a cardinal of the Church of La, Myrta. Our heroine confirmed that it was him. The boy ordered the rain to stop, and the weather immediately became clear. After which she asked if Scion knew how to do this. The boy explained that cardinals have power over certain things. He must be the one who knows how to control the rain. The little girl thought about the fact that Helio was more capable than she thought, and it was very good that she had decided to be friends with him after all. The crown prince asked if she had fun with her new friend. The girl answered that she had, and told him that they had walked to different places and that he had used his blessing on her. Then our heroine thought about the fact that Nathaniel would have enjoyed hearing stories about the ruins too. She would surely find him and rescue him. After a while, the young man pondered that how dare he leave his mark on something that belongs only to him. Since when did the Temple of La Merte allow itself to do such a thing? He was too angry to leave it for nothing. The very moment they had their first resonance with Nicephore, the urge to kill that he had constantly felt subsided, and he felt alive for the first time. Why he had decided to leave his disgusting odor on Nikki? Was it really because he decided to take her away from him? After that, he called the mercenaries and ordered them to destroy the temple. One of them asked if they should kill the worshippers. The young man thought about the fact that Nikki would really dislike that. So out loud, he told them to just tear down the temple and destroy the things that were profiting from the donations, and let them see to it that none of the people got hurt. After they left, the boy noted that even next to Nikki, he still continued to freak out. Meanwhile, Helio had gone back to the temple and reported back to someone. The young man, surrounded by blue-haired maidens, asked if he had met the dragon princess. In the central temple of La Merte, there is a being called God. He took a piece of himself and created Helio. The boy confirmed that he has met the girl he is so interested in, but he is not sure if she is exactly who he hopes she should be. The man told him to come closer so that he could read his mind. The cardinal felt that he was only created out of necessity, for his mentor did not like him. Maybe that's why the boy was so happy when Nicephorus said she would be a friend to him. The boy then added that he had definitely left the god trace on her, and it seems she didn't notice it. After checking all the memories, the man stated that the boy had become very good friends with this draconian woman. Helio realized that he would never escape from there for the rest of his life. Therefore, he was very sad that he didn't know when he would be able to see Her Majesty again. Meanwhile, the palace was already discussing the fact that the princess had saved the great sage's life. After all, she is still so young, but she is already so amazing, and indeed Her Majesty has incredible abilities. The little girl thought that she didn't strive for this, but now everyone was praising her abilities. This was an achievement that could be entered into the secret archive, at least right now. But the Emperor hadn't returned from the ruins yet, and it was worth being patient while public opinion took root. But what she should do until then she didn't know, so she waited for Scion, who should have come to her by now. But suddenly George entered the room and apologized for barging in, but he needed to be informed that His Majesty was still not awake. The man added sadly that perhaps the lad was ill, and he was very worried about him. The girl thought that could be the case, for it had never happened that Scion had slept so long. The girl said that she would go to the Crown Prince right away, so let him not worry so much. The girl didn't understand what was going on. Was it because of the obsidian ring she gave him yesterday? Going to Scion in the room, our heroine noted that he has a high fever. She immediately began to ask a lot of questions ranging from what the doctor said and whether he had taken the medicine to whether he had gotten sick because he had been working late. The boy exhaustedly replied that he was fine. He wanted to get up and see her, but it turned out that she had to come herself. Our heroine said that she would come until he was better, let him not even doubt it, after which she said she would forbid him to work today. But the boy objected that he still had some business to finish. The little girl exclaimed that she would do everything in his place. She thought to herself that she had been an empress in her previous life, and that she was not doing any work at the moment because she did not want to. Then she asked if he wanted her to call the servants here. The prince replied that he had given them the day off as soon as he felt a fever coming on. The little girl noted that apparently he doesn't want to show them his weakness. She's the only one who sees him in this state, so she has to protect him. Rolling up her sleeves, the little girl confidently went to the table, where there were cases waiting for a certain decision. After a while, showing him one of the papers, our heroine asked what it was. Sion explained that it was related to the New Year's Eve party. Nicephore thought to herself that if he is talking about that terribly boring party, so the young man must now participate in such events. Instead of all these unnecessary celebrations, it would be 100 times more useful just to look at the sea. Then exclaimed if he doesn't want to have a party in nature this time and spend it not indoors, but on the sea. We could also go boating since New Year's Eve is the summer season. The Crown Prince supported her idea and said that it was very interesting, after which he asked if she would like to write the instructions personally. The little girl exclaimed that, of course, and she would spell out everything down to the smallest detail. But after a while, she literally switched off because of the large amount of information and work done. The young man took her in his arms and decided to put her to bed to sleep a little more, because she is so small, but always trying to protect him. His gaze became obsessed again, and he said that only his Nikki was the most beautiful of all in the whole world. He was sorry that he pretended to be sick and made the little girl work, but she would be very worried if she knew about the destruction of the temple, and actually it would be really nice to work together with the dragon princess every day. He then decided to read what the little girl had written. It described the precautions for holding an event on the coast, as well as outlined everything needed to organize it. The lad pointed out that all important documents should lie on top and that Nikki expected a great deal from this banquet. So he used the seal that they put on emergency orders, for everything must be prepared just perfectly. Then he sat down beside her and said that thanks to her, he is having new dreams. He looks at her sleeping face and he is very curious about what she is dreaming about. The young man also ponders that they will get married one day, though it will be a long wait as she is still a child. Sometime later, the emperor held a special meeting with the aristocrats to honor the dragon princess' contribution to the ruins. His Majesty announced that Nicephore Risayan had made a great contribution to the state and deserved to be honored. Our heroine was very pleased with everything that was happening, so she listened attentively. Others immediately picked up that the princess had saved the life of a great sage who is the treasure of their country. The sage's tower will never forget her feat. The young dragon princess was able to assess the situation faster than anyone else, so she is a very wise and honorable person. The man who was always against her was darker than a cloud and could not object to anything. Our heroine did not waste time and said that, as a reward, she wanted to get into the secret library. Then she began to list that she had rescued a sage, discovered a bunch of cultural jewels, and quickly translated the tablets. Therefore, she felt that should be enough for her to be granted a pass there. Garrett exclaimed what library, whether she even knew what she was talking about. The little girl replied that yes, and the documents she needed were there. The man said that she should tell him what they were, because it would be easier if he could find them and bring them to her. She noted to herself that it was not for nothing that she did not like him at first sight. The emperor turned to her and whispered that he would cover for her, just let her make a fuss. Our heroine took note of this and replied to that arrogant man that it was none of his business what kind of documents she wanted. Another man exclaimed that, as expected, her grace knows no bounds. She's very noble and majestic. Tiny noted to herself that this was the same man who didn't want to give her cultural treasures. Why did his opinion of her suddenly change so drastically? Then he asked her to repeat what she had just said. Our heroine mumbled confusedly that it was none of his business. The man marveled that he had waited 10 years for someone to tell him that. The emperor suggested that the matter be reconsidered and asked if everyone agreed with Duke Garrett. The aristocrats replied that they did not. The princess is entitled to other honors in addition to access to the secret library. Agrio said that he was of the same opinion, so in that case it was necessary to choose someone to go with the princess to the library. Scion listened to all this with great pleasure. Our heroine didn't understand why the Duke was staring at her like that. It looked like he was planning something, and she was very curious about what he was thinking. After it was decided who would go there with Nicephore, the emperor announced that the meeting was closed. The secret library would be opened right now for her. Our heroine was very happy that she would finally be able to see the records left by Kortan, for she had been waiting for this for a long time. Standing in front of the entrance, the heroine asked Scion when she would finally be able to enter. The young man answered that they had to wait for the arrival of 5 witnesses from noble families and 1 each from wizards and sages. Without them, even the emperor himself could not enter. The girl decided to look around for the time being, for she was very curious as to what was so great that one could not go in there alone. She noticed that the pillars were made of the ribs of whales with hexagonal tails. They must have been very hard to catch, for they were incredibly dangerous. Then she wondered if Doom Kortan had helped build this library. Then the little girl wondered if Doom Kortan had helped her build this library, and then she thought about the fact that she had been thinking about them a lot lately and tapped the pillar with her hand. Then the emperor appeared and told all the witnesses to put their signatures on a certain paper. It seemed to our heroine that time dragged on forever, and they seemed to be doing everything very slowly. The emperor said that there was not much time left, let her be patient. Finally they got inside, and the little girl looked around admiringly. The library was very old, but everything was perfectly preserved. Apparently it was because a lot of things were made of whale bones. Then she began to wander around the huge room and looked for the records of the first emperor. Suddenly a book under glass caught her eye, and she immediately realized that it was the diary of the first emperor of Kortan. The girl wanted to get it out, but Scion stopped her and told her to let him help her. This book could only be taken out by authorized members of the imperial family. He then handed her the journal and told her that she could read in peace and take her time. He would not distract her or interfere with anything. She recognized the handwriting as the same Kortan she knew. The way the dots were placed at the end of the sentence, the curved handwriting, it was exactly what she had seen hundreds of thousands of times on documents. She had a strange feeling that she was reading his handwriting again. It was probably because she wanted to believe that he hadn't betrayed her. Did he really want to become an emperor that badly? All he had to do was just ask her for it, and she would gladly give in to him. Then she took a deep breath and told herself that she needed to calm down, for a ruler must exercise self-control. One must examine more carefully all that was written there. One page described the 49th day since the founding of the state. Things were going very well. The people, who needed something to believe in, easily accepted the new religion. But yet they knew a person who was still deep in their hearts. They had not forgotten the goddess of the sea. The little girl noted that means the religion of La. Myrta was founded by Kortan. But what such a goddess of the sea was, she did not understand, whether such a religion existed. So she thought about going to the main temple as soon as possible. On the next page, she saw a picture of Teresa. It angered her that why was it necessary to draw her face on the binding? It would have been better to just draw half of her face already then. In the bottom right corner it was written that this was their goddess, whom they should always remember to glorify. It was Teresa, who is the goddess of the sea. Our heroine didn't understand the logic of it, because he sealed her and condemned her to long agonizing sufferings, although he considered her a deity. But the diary does not say that Kortan lived happily ever after. Only his pain remained. On the 364th day since the founding of the state, he wrote that his body was in a terrible state. The blood is now cold and then boils again. He cannot describe the pain. It's as if his body is disintegrating and putting itself back together again. His children may have to go through the same thing. The guy realizes he's slowly losing his temper. What has he done to get to this point? But there is no turning back. It's a sin he must endure. There is a reckoning for his foolishness, which he has left for another time. He must surely endure it all. Our heroine noted that this is the penultimate page of the diary. There were no other documents linking her and Kortan anymore. On the last page was written the 366th day since the founding of the state. The phrase was to the supreme head of the Church of La, Myrta, and nothing else. The girl was very annoyed by his manner of interrupting half a word and not finishing his thoughts until the end. In the end, he could only accomplish one thing, that she was reborn again in this generation, and that was why he had sealed her for 1,000 years. But he didn't write why he did it, and the information about Doom was missing for some reason. Kortan betrayed her because of him. There must be something else in the diary. It can't be everything. Suddenly she could feel that one of the pages was much thicker than the others. The two thin pages were glued together. It was a method used in Atlantis to hide something important. If you gently wet the edges of these pages, they can be unglued. Our heroine succeeded in this native way and had the note in her hands. When the seal was broken and she woke up as a child, the people she knew were already dead, and everything that was dear to her was gone. Waking up alone in the future and living with the memories of the past is very hard. Did they know how lonely she was? Did they think she could endure this deep loneliness? Suddenly, she heard Sion's voice asking if she was all right. She started wiping her tears for him not to notice anything and replied that she was fine. Need to read a little more. Our heroine noted that the Crown Prince is very tactful, as he doesn't even try to find out anything and doesn't touch her. Unfolding the note, Nise foresaw that it was written there that the numbers were wrong. The sign in the upper right corner meant that Doom had written the note. So he had left something behind, but she didn't know how she could figure out what it was about. What other numbers were wrong? With anger, the girl fell to the floor. The Emperor asked her why she had collapsed there, because she had found what she was looking for, and it must have been because of what was written there. The little girl showed him the note, and His Majesty could not say anything except that it was very interesting. The young man began to wonder what numbers were written there. The girl thought to herself that did he really think she had not wondered about it? Then he added that in any case, it was time to leave already, so let him pack. On the way out, Nicephore did not understand why Kortan had hidden the note. They had conspired among themselves and betrayed her. Had she just been reborn after 1,000 years as a dragon princess, and that was it. But then who was the first dragon princess? The diary was only about Kortan's suffering and nothing more. A while later, the sad little girl sat in her room and thought about what she had learned. The mercenaries in the background didn't understand what was happening to her and were afraid to ask her. She couldn't get those numbers out of her head because she didn't know what they meant. They were either dates that had been written in Kortan's diary, or they had nothing to do with the diary. She had to remember the entries she had read that were related to Kortan and Atlantis. She remembered that she had read in a book that Atlantis, with all its rich culture, had disappeared under the sea, and only 2 apostles were left alive. Perhaps by numbers, Doom meant the number of survivors. The inscription that the numbers were wrong could speak to the fact that she and Kortan weren't the only ones who survived. Then she thought of the Crown Prince of Roxborough, who reminded her of someone his ancestors could have been Atlantean. Then it was likely that the first dragon princess was from Atlantis. They say she cured the madness of the first emperor, and he must have been a difficult man. Kortan wasn't cursed by a sea dragon if he put the curse on himself and his descendants. So the dragon princess definitely used Atlantis magic to cure him, and most likely the Rizzion family was created so that someone outside the imperial family could lift the curse on his descendants, and that someone was her. Kortan was counting on the girl to save his dynasty. He couldn't have come up with such a complicated and intricate plan just because he loved Doom. There must be some other reason. Suddenly our heroine remembered the oath that you can't take until you're 15, but when you do, something must definitely happen. But she was in a panic of what else to wait so long. After all, she is only 7 years old. Meanwhile, the mercenaries were arguing loudly about who should approach the princess. One of them said that the second one should go because he had a higher salary. The young man objected that his salary had nothing to do with it. The little girl began to get annoyed as she could hear everything they were saying. Suddenly the doors opened and a third mercenary entered, asking Her Majesty to try something. The young man placed the cake in front of her and said that he had gone and bought it just now. Moreover, he had taken it with his paycheck. The little girl thanked him and said that it must be very expensive. Tasting a bite of it, Nicephore remarked that it was very tasty. Bending the fork in her hands, she thought that she shouldn't assume that she had already learned so much and that was enough. She would surely get to the bottom of it. Watching as the little girl continued to eat the cake with fierceness, the mercenaries noted that she must have enjoyed it very much. After a while, the little girl remembered the conversation of subordinates about their wages and thought that maybe she should also slowly start earning. So our heroine came to her brother and said that she wanted to earn money. Heberg replied that he was very interested in why she suddenly wanted to do something like that. Let her tell him how she decided to make money. Our heroine noted to herself that she came to this decision after much thought, and he does not even understand it. Meanwhile, Adele entered the room, who showed a large amount of jewelry. The young man asked what it was. Was it really the same treasure she had found in the ruins? Nicephore replied that it was. She would sell it all and make a decent amount of money. Tiny decided to consult with him on what to sell first and asked if she could do it all at once. The older brother objected that they could carry a lot of cultural significance. Our heroine replied that the emperor had authorized her to keep it all anyway. She thought to herself that she had sneaked most of these things in secret. Then the babe added that she needed money, which she could dispose of as she wished. She would spend it on building a ship and then hire people to go with her to the Arctic Circle. Heberg asked if she was going to go looking for Nathaniel personally. She replied that her brother had no free time, so she would go on her own. She thought to herself that she would check if the sea giants were still alive. The young man said that it would take years to build a big ship. Her sister exclaimed that it was a good thing, because she would grow up by then. The young man added that she would need about 100 billion gold coins. The little girl was not confused at all and said that in that case, let her sell it all as dearly as possible. Her brother said she would have to have an auction, but that wasn't enough. She would have to find something that would attract a lot of attention. Nicephore thought to herself that it would be easy, because from the emperor, the great sage and lord of the magic tower, she could get anything. The Sage Tower is a sacred abode for all kinds of learning, research, and philosophy. The scholars associated with the tower are focused on their own research, but they share common interests. This is the country of Atlantis, which existed in ancient times. The wise men are jealous of the dragon princess' ability to understand the language of the ancient giants, and some of them even regard her with distrust. Suddenly, a young man burst into the room with an urgent announcement. He announced that the dragon princess was selling the artifacts of the sea giants. Those present were shocked by this information, for they might have the opportunity to study these creatures in detail. The Magic Tower is a gathering place for those who have dedicated themselves to magic. If there is one thing that is common to those who are engaged in constant debate, it is an interest in magic in ancient Atlantis. The magic of that empire is very rare in their time. Some wizards are extremely interested in the ancestor of the dragon princess Nicephore Rission. There are rumors in the tower that the princess will sell artifacts of sea giants, so you can save up some money and buy something. When the head of the Imperial Palace's History Protection Department learned that the girl was going to sell cultural artifacts at auction, he fainted from shock. The staff immediately applied for the use of the budget to go to the auction and buy everything. Finally, the long-awaited day of the auction came, and our heroine was very excited. For the sake of this day, she got things from the Emperor, the Great Sage, and the Lord of the Magic Tower. They were the Great Sage's beard comb, the Emperor's robe, and an item created by the Lord of the Magic Tower himself. From the sale of these items, she would receive a commission of 5%. Suddenly, the Crown Prince picked her up in his arms and said that it was already time for them to go. Seeing her elder brother, she immediately ran up to him and asked him if many guests had come. Heberg replied that if she was so interested, she could go and see for herself. Looking into the hall where the event would be held, our heroine saw a huge number of people. From the Tower of Sages and the Magic Tower, a great number of people had come. There were also quite a few from the History Preservation Department. On top of that, people from other countries in general were present in this hall. It seems like our heroine should definitely be able to raise the necessary amount of money to build the ship. Suddenly, her older brother appeared and told her and the hereditary principal to quickly go and take their seats. The little girl noted that it could have been easy to just say how many people had come. She would have seen them later anyway. Suddenly, among the guests present, the little girl spotted Helio and didn't realize what he was doing there. But that was fine, because the little girl still wanted to go visit and see him. But how would she approach him? Would she only be able to get him out to talk to her? Suddenly, Scion asked irritably what she was looking at. The girl wondered if he disliked Helio. Nicephorus decided to quickly change the subject and said that she wasn't looking at anything and that the auction was already starting. The host began to warm up the crowd and yell about how this was the great legacy of Atlantis and rare materials, in order to get people to raise their bids faster. Suddenly, the cardinal noticed that not far from him sat a dragon princess. Smiling sweetly, our heroine began to wave her hand at him to say hello in this way. The crown prince asked if she was hungry, because the servant said that they had prepared a snack for them. The girl exclaimed that she was, for she had quite forgotten to eat breakfast. When Scion decided to feed her, the girl asked if the crown prince had to feed her. The boy objected that he did it all the time in the palace. Nicephorus said that's not where they were at the moment. The young man replied to tell her not to talk nonsense. There was nothing wrong with that, so he continued to feed her. The little girl looked at him and thought about the fact that he was so kind, polite, and caring, as well as handsome, cool, and very cute. He must make just the perfect husband. I wonder how many girls will run after him when he gets older. Noticing that our heroine did not take her eyes off him, the guy asked what she was thinking about so deeply. Nicephore replied that she was just thinking that the girl who would marry him would be very lucky. The young man changed his face and said that why would he marry someone else since he had her? Tiny replied that the crown prince and the dragon princess should be bonded, but it is not necessary to marry. He has to find someone he will love. Noticing that Sion was very upset, the girl began to wonder if maybe she had made him feel abandoned and how to fix it all now. Suddenly, the cardinal approached them and asked permission to greet them. The young man immediately asked what the clerics of a fallen religion needed here. Who would have thought that as ordinary people, those who should pray closed in their temple had come here? Helio replied that it was God's blessing. They came because they recognized that there would be a special item in this auction. Meanwhile, our heroine didn't understand why the atmosphere was so tense. Wasn't Sion saying that there was an odor attached to her just because of that? The crown prince said that he had recently sent a gift to La Merte. Then he asked if they had received it. The boy replied that it had left many innocent believers without a roof over their heads. He would do well to learn humility from them. Believers are not sinners. Our heroine realized that if she did not intervene and reconcile them, it would not end well, so she exclaimed that she was very glad to see Helio. Then she added that she had been told that she had a scent left on her last time, if he knew what it was. The boy replied that it had gotten there by accident. It seemed that the odor was left because he had put a blood blessing on her. Was she uncomfortable because of that? The girl exclaimed that since it wasn't on purpose, it was fine. Then she quickly shoved him away from where she and the prince were sitting and said that she would talk to him separately later. A while later, Sion informed her that the total amount of the auction had already reached 10 billion. She was delighted, for with this money, she would be able to find Nathaniel. Her older brother came up to them and informed them that it was time for the speech he had told her about, and the little girl went to the stage. The host announced that before they continued, they would give the floor to the dragon princess who had made today's event happen. Taking the microphone in her hands, the little girl thanked everyone present for coming. They all know that her name is Nicephore Risean, and there is a reason why she has organized this auction. This is the first time she will say this, but instead of sending a third search ship to the polar regions, the girl wants to build one herself. She will find the sea giants that live out there and search through them for missing people. Therefore, if there is anyone in this hall who wants to go with her, let them say so now. Heberg then picked up the microphone and said that he would answer any questions if there were any. A few days later, the emperor said that he wished he had seen it all with his own eyes, for they say it was very impressive. Our heroine replied that they were all exaggerating too much. His Majesty clarified whether she was sure she was going to build a ship with this huge sum of money. The little girl replied that yes, and Heberg has even found a shipbuilding company. She wants to recreate the ancient ship of Atlantis. The warships of this empire were very sleek, strong, and fast. Their feature, by which you can immediately distinguish such a ship, was the bow figure made in the shape of a man. Then our heroine pondered whether the sculpture of whom to hang on her ship, Heberg or Sion. But her musings were interrupted by the emperor, who asked what had happened to Sionoi that day at the auction. He was told that he had had a very long conversation with the Cardinal of La Merte. The girl thought to herself why he was asking if he knew everything. They had a fight, and the little girl does not want to talk about it at all. Agrio said that the crown prince is in a depressed state all the last days and is working very hard. Our heroine thought about the fact that after the auction, Sion has not come to the Pearl Palace once precisely because he is too busy. But His Majesty said that he was probably offended about something. After all, the young man came to the Pearl Palace every day. Regardless of whether he was busy or not, the guy always found a free minute for the little princess. Our heroine replied that he was probably just very busy because the New Year's banquet was coming up. Then, paying attention to the color of the liquid in the cup, Nicephor thought to herself that she should make a carnival mask of the same color. Then she added that she needed to buy something, but without Sion and Heberg knowing about it. Then she wrote what she needed on a piece of paper and handed it to the emperor. The young man replied that he would order it all to be prepared as soon as possible. A few days later, the day of the New Year's banquet came, and everyone was preparing for it. Our heroine noted that this decoration was made quite well, and at first she wanted to use it as a piercing, because some people pierce their ears for this purpose. Adele said that the weather was beautiful today and asked if she was going to ride on the ship. The little girl replied that of course she would, and only she would be on it. The woman was surprised and said that it was very dangerous. The girl replied that she should not worry, because if she was in danger, she would call Sion. She thought to herself that he wouldn't be able to avoid her. Adele exclaimed that as expected, the girl had the perfect plan. Finished preparing the princess, the woman wished her luck and told her to be careful. Suddenly, Lucas appeared in front of her and said that he had come to see Her Highness off. Putting a mask on his face, our heroine asked what happened to the color of his hair. The guy explained that lately this color has come into fashion. Young girls want to look like her, and young guys want to look like Mr. Nathaniel, so this color is popular. It is said to have been developed by an elder mage from the magic tower named Shakalot. Our heroine noted to herself that the guy who begged her to take him on as an apprentice still couldn't get rid of her. Lucas asked what she didn't know about it. He figured the girl didn't change her hair color since she already knew that a lot of people were going with the same color now. At this point in the banquet, most of the young girls with the same hair color as Her Majesty. Our heroine remarked that all was lost, for how then would the crown prince recognize her? Nicephor immediately heard the girls discussing that they might not even recognize the princess, since most have the same hair color. They might not realize it's her even if she's standing next to them. The girl is rumored to be very pretty and cute, and is said to be a real beauty when she grows up, but Countess Betelgeuse is also very cute. Nicephor noted that apparently this is the one and only daughter of the prime minister with a goatee. She turned 9 this year, but she has already gathered friends around her. When she grows up, she will go very far. These girls were like turtles who crawled out to sunbathe in the sun. Suddenly, the gossipy girls noticed that Nicephor was watching them for a very long time and wondered who she was. The little girl immediately realized that she had overemphasized them and decided to go in search of Sion. But suddenly, Betelgeuse came up to her and asked her what her name was. Our heroine thought that she did not like the fact that she looked at her, but she paid attention to them because they are very cute. She said out loud that her name was Teresa. The girls marveled at such an unusual name, which they had heard for the first time, and said that it seemed that the little girl had never been to such events before, so they would go everywhere with her. Then Lasayana said that soon the dancing would begin. Usually at parties where children can participate, the very first to dance are the little ladies and gentlemen. So let her see if there is anyone she would like to dance with. You have to be clever or you'll have to dance with just anyone. The girls picked up on the fact that she wouldn't be able to attend parties often until she officially made her social debut. So let her choose very carefully. On a day like this, one should create beautiful memories. Initially, Nicephor didn't even think of participating in the dance, but the little turtles hyped it all up to her so much that she can't disappoint them. After a while, the girls lined up in a row in front of the boys. Lasayana explained that at first everyone dances in a single row, and after the group dance, she would have to choose a boy to dance with. If the little girl does not know something, then let her just repeat after them. Our heroine noted to herself that she was not trained in dance, but she thinks that she should succeed. At the first step, the partner stepped on her foot and began to apologize. The girl explained that she wasn't a good dancer either, so it was okay. Betelgeuse then approached her and offered to dance with her. During the dance, the girl said to beware of the blonde boy behind her because he keeps his eyes on her. Our heroine asked what was wrong with him watching. Lasayana explained that it's Bane Carrot and his henchmen. These boys are very bad. They push and hit the weaker kids. It dawned on the little girl that this was a relative of the man who was always trying to push her around. It turns out this girl asked her to the dance on purpose to warn her. She's very sweet. Nicephore started laughing and asked if she had asked her to dance just to tell her that that boy could hurt her. Lasayana exclaimed that you can't laugh so openly and need to be more serious. She then explained that these guys pick on children of people like her who aren't used to these kinds of events and bully them. His father is Earl Garrett, so no one can do anything to him. Suddenly, our heroine tilted her back sharply and everyone around her marveled at such a movement. Then Betelgeuse thanked her for the dance and ran to her mother. Looking around, Nicephore realized that all the children had come with their parents. Suddenly, she was surrounded by a crowd of girls who began to ask what family she was from and let her say at least her name. But our heroine thought that they began to already guess who she is, so you can reveal that she is a dragon princess and intimidate the guys who hurt the weak. But suddenly the crown prince came up to her and said he had finally found her. After a while, they went on a boat trip to the sea together. The little girl began to tell him that Count Garrett's son was hurting weak children. The lad offered to call him in and scold him, but the little girl said it was better to pick the right moment and shame him. Scion said that just from the mere thought that she will talk to him, he wants to kill him. Our heroine noted to herself that maybe it's because she hasn't seen him for a long time, but the guy seems unstable to her. So she said out loud that no one asked him to say such terrible things. The young man apologized and said that he had not seen her for a long time, so he could not hold back. Our heroine replied that the boy, of course, misbehaves, but not to the point of killing him. He is a child after all, and he only needs to be taught a lesson. The crown prince replied that the little girl was right as always. The girl asked why he was not happy again. It had been so long since they had seen each other, and he decided to tell her just that. She then sat closer to him and asked why he was so angry and hadn't seen her for a long time. It's not like she could guess it herself. The young man replied that he was wrong, and the girl asked him not to do that again. After all, she was very worried. The little girl thought every day to go to him, or better not, and did not know what to do. Suddenly, Scion had a tear rolling down his cheek, and the girl was very surprised by it. He then began to explain that he felt very hurt that day at the auction. After all, he thought that they would get married when they grew up, and the girl wished him to find one with whom he would be happy. The prince dreams every day that he will be her fiancé, but she seems to think so absolutely not. Then added that apparently he was not good enough for her liking. Nicephorus exclaimed that he wasn't. The young man began to get angry and asked then why she said those words that hurt him so much, since he only wants to marry her. The little girl realized that apparently those words had shocked him. She had made a stupid mistake and should have said it when he is an adult and loves someone. Scion can't tell the difference between love and affection and infatuation and interest. After all, he only became infatuated with her because they are connected by fate and she spared him pain. But these are not romantic feelings, but something similar to the affection one feels for a teacher or educator. Nicephore said she had read that you have to be in love to get married, so that's what she said. She likes the boy a lot, but that is not the affection one feels when one wants to get married. The darkened crown prince asked what true love should be. The little girl began to explain that it was when one's chest ached at the sight of that person, and one's heart began to beat faster when one smiled at the thought of that person. Then she thought about the fact that it was the kind of feeling she had experienced when she was around Kortan, and it was the kind of thing that people got married to. She didn't want her and Scion to become estranged over something as uncertain as marriage, whether he would be able to take her words correctly. After a little silence, the guy asked if she wanted to marry Helio in that case. Our heroine didn't understand why the conversation took that direction. The little girl grabbed her head and exclaimed what kind of nonsense he was talking about. Why would she want to marry Helio? The boy asked if he wasn't the one she was just talking about. The little girl exclaimed that no, of course not. Why would he even think that? The boy explained that it seemed to him that she had become so close to him that she wanted to marry that young man instead of him. Nicephorus objected that it was all nonsense and it was absolutely not true, so let him say no more about it. Then she hugged him and told him that even if they don't get married, they should continue to be a family. The young man pressed her against him and said that it will be as she wants because they will still be a family. After a while, the babe informed him that she had prepared a New Year's present for him. The young man noted that the trident badge is very beautiful, and he will carry it with him always. After the end of the event, Adele brushed our heroine's hair and asked if they had a good time. The girl replied that yes, and she really liked La Sayana, so she would introduce them later. Then the woman made up the bed and said that apparently the girl was very tired, so let her lie down to rest already. When our heroine fell asleep, a hologram of the crown prince appeared near her bed. He stroked her head and said that she doesn't know about it, but the guy comes every day just to look at her because he wants to see her even sleeping. But what was strange was that when the prince would look at her sleeping, he would get visions of a strange woman in his head. She doesn't look like Nikki, but she gives off the same light that illuminates everything around her. That's why the crown prince is sometimes restless when he watches the little girl sleep, because she knows so much about the world and often stares off into the distance. Plus, she mumbles names in her sleep that he's never heard before. The young man is afraid that she will turn out to be a completely different person from the Nikki he knew. Whether she is the reincarnation of the first dragon princess is certain. A while later, the emperor and the crown prince sat looking at the portraits. The young man pointed to one of them and asked Sion if he liked it, but the boy replied that it looked all too gloomy. He liked the other one better, but needed to put it aside as a candidate for now. Agrio said that he probably couldn't paint an accurate portrait of Nicephore without meeting her in person. So he is right. Everything must be chosen more carefully. They then settled on 3 choices and decided to have the girl choose one of these artists. The boy asked what kind of person her mom was. He knows that coral fairies are a strong fighting race. It is said that Duchess Ninnis Rission was a cold-blooded and strong personality, but he had only heard how others described her. The man replied that she was a person who loved her family more than anything, and the girl was not cold-blooded or unfeeling. She was just very close-minded, and it was hard for her, as she was forced to live with people after leaving her people. One day the Emperor and Duke Kortan Empire found Ninnis unconscious in the forest. They carried her straight to the Emperor's castle, and her sister personally took it upon herself to care for her. She was guarded so that no one could get through to her. The man didn't know what Ninnis was talking to his sister about, but after half a month she recovered and decided not to return to her homeland. After that, Kortan began to teach her the language. He was kind and friendly, so he became a good teacher for her. Suddenly the boy asked if His Majesty had confessed his love to her but was rejected. The man coughed and said that it was actually a secret. Besides, she is the Emperor's first love, and he can't talk about it so easily. Agrio thought about what he had promised Ninnis, that he would let her children live freely and happily, but her second son had disappeared without a trace, and the man could not forgive himself for that. He then told the boy to look after Nicephore. The prince replied that of course he would do so. The young man exclaimed that he was very discreet and let him grow up quickly, because when he becomes an adult, the man will be able to leave the throne with peace of mind and find a quiet life of a farmer. The next day, our heroine gathered all the maids and said that she had decided to give them a feast. Let them eat as much as they want. It was all prepared in the palace of the crown prince. The girls were very grateful to her. Nicephore noted that they were very happy, so it was necessary to organize such a thing more often. After a moment, Lucas appeared in the doorway and thanked the princess for the invitation. The little girl exclaimed that she had been expecting him, so let it pass quickly. The maids did not expect to see Lucas here with the other knights. Adele then handed our heroine a glass, but she was very surprised and asked where the maid got it from. The woman pointed to the side and said that she took this plum juice in that barrel, but she disappeared somewhere and was not there. Our heroine asked her to hide the glass so that no one would see it. Nicephore thought that it had been a long time since anyone had tried to poison her so openly, especially at a sudden banquet that no one outside knew about. So there's an assassin in attendance. It's not like she's stupid or a role model, but it's frustrating that they're testing her mercy like this. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Roxborough, near the Kortan Empire, King Marcus was very angry to learn that the dragon princess was building a ship. Had this girl found out about their plans? The subordinate replied that she hadn't. She's probably trying to find her brother who disappeared without a trace a few years ago. The man said that the people in the empire are not in their right mind if this girl decided to build a ship worth several billion gold coins because of that. He then asked how far they had progressed in the selection process. The servant replied that about half of their subjects had already been screened and he was trying to speed up the process. The king said that they should be careful because 3 generations have been preparing for this and it will finally happen in his lifetime. They will build an ark and survive the day of destruction. There's been a prophecy in the Roxborough royal family since time immemorial. It said that one day the day of destruction would come for the entire continent. And in order to be ready for that day, Roxborough has been building a huge ark for a very long time. So in the future, Marcus will go down in history as the king who prevented the death of all life by building a ship. But the man really didn't like the fact that the dragon princess had also started building the ship. Does she really know about the prophecy? The subordinate reported that Duke Garrett had sent them a recording balloon. It shows the construction of this ship very clearly. The man noted that it is indeed huge, and even the framework is almost ready. The servant said that the construction is going fast, as the dragon princess has put her huge money into it. The king asked how many people would be sailing on it. The men replied that it was going to hold about 500 people, but the actual capacity was much larger. Since the girl probably doesn't know about the prophecy, it seems they should consider the fact that maybe there is another purpose that they don't even know about. Marcus was very angry, for only the great Roxborough should be the savior of the new world. For 3 generations, they had secretly made alliances with neighboring nations, and despite the failures, they still managed to create the perfect form of the Ark. How dare the shameless Kortan Empire interfere with this noble plan? The king then asked if he was sure that they did not know about their plan. The servant replied that His Majesty need not worry. Even if they find out about it, they only need to destroy their ship. The guards there are so lax that it wouldn't cost Duke Garrett anything to set up surveillance there, so he can watch the construction through the orb all he wants, and Roxborough is almost at his goal. On the Ark, farmers will be able to grow fruit and graze cattle. The aristocrats will continue to enjoy their peaceful lives, and all of this will only be possible because of His Majesty. The man noted that the dragon princess was turning 8 years old this year. The girl still bothers him, so it's better to kill her as soon as possible. The front men have been by her side for a few years now, so let him order them to take over. There were 3 groups of assassins in the Kortan Empire. The largest of them were the Crescents, who were renowned for their dexterity and professionalism. Another were the Threshaw, who held the great principle of not killing children. And the third were the Fleur. This group consisted of only women. The man reflected that the Crescent Moon Brazen men demanded a huge fee. The Threshaw don't kill children, so they're not worth going to. And the Fleur, on the other hand, kill after a long time of gaining the trust of their victims. So they're pretty much foolproof, and they'd be perfect for killing a dragon princess. So let Agrio wait for a while, and he will destroy everyone he cares about one by one, just like he killed the previous emperor, his sister, and the Rission couple. Now only the crown prince and the dragon princess remain. This time, it's already time to use false faces. Let them tremble in fear and kneel before Roxborough. A few days later, the mage informed Her Highness that he had put an anti-corrosion spell on the nails, so let her have a look. The little girl was very busy, so told her to put them on the table and wait a while. The other youngster reported that they made the bottom deeper like she wanted, and the stability increased. He realizes she is very busy, but let her take a look as it is very urgent. The little girl had no free time at all and was constantly being tugged about building the ship. After examining the nails, the girl remarked that the quality was excellent, but did they immerse them in seawater? The young man replied that yes, and in a week of being in the water, they had not rusted. She then asked everyone to leave as there was a need for some rest and a break. Decisions were more or less made, but she worried about the captain's position still being open. Benchensky had gone missing during winter training, and his daughter had gone missing 3 years ago. Both of the strongest candidates were missing. Why did all the most talented people go missing when she needed them so badly? Unexpectedly, Bavoki entered the bedroom and offered our heroine a snack of cake during her break. Paying attention to the model of the ship, which was on the table at the princess, the girl marveled at how beautiful it was. She was very curious, as she had never sailed on a big ship in her life. Afterward, she asked if she could sail on it when they were done. The little girl noticed that she had a trident brooch attached to her uniform. Then she thanked Bavoki for the cake, but did not eat it, and said that of course she would be able to swim on that ship. Our heroine was getting tired of all this. Bavoki has been by her side and waiting for a few years, but is still in no great hurry to kill her. Who would have ever thought she was an assassin for hire? No one would have known about it if the little girl hadn't figured it out, or would be dead before they even began to suspect. Either way, she couldn't be allowed to run away or do anything to herself. It would be good if she was caught at the time she specified. Day by day, she was getting colder and colder to this girl, so in about a week, it would be a good time to get started. She'd given Bavoki a chance more than once. At least let her come to her now and apologize before the babe caught her red-handed. After a while, Adele stopped by and informed her that she had a visitor. Baby immediately informed everyone that for today her work is over and she will look at everything tomorrow as it should be. Our heroine ran to meet Lasayana and was happy to make friends with her. Lasayana is the only daughter of the Betelgeuse dynasty. Her beautiful mother constantly teaches the girl moral principles. She says that one should not disrespect other children, even if she is higher in status, as she will tarnish the honor of their family. Also, let her not argue with people and always be polite. Modesty and politeness will help her rise high. Thanks to her mother's upbringing, she's grown up to be a wonderful person who shares love with people. Just recently, she even helped a strange girl. She thought it was the girl's first time at such an event, so she offered to walk with her, and this little girl turned out to be a dragon princess. On the way, her mother told her not to worry because the princess liked her, since the baby decided to invite her to visit. But if she does something wrong, she will have to say goodbye to life. Our heroine joyfully greeted her new friend. Lasayana and her mother bowed and greeted the mistress of the Pearly Palace, blessed by the sea. Nesfor exclaimed that there was no need for these formalities and let them straighten up. Our heroine asked of the girl how she was doing. Let her not be afraid of her and say at least a word. If she came, the princess wants to show her the Pearly Palace and treat her to something delicious. Betelgeuse thought that it was still necessary to observe etiquette. Lady Sylvia went along with them and said she was honored. During the tea party, the little girl asked what the girl liked to do. She answered that she likes to play dolls and loves horseback riding. She really likes horses. Our heroine thought to herself that in the last few days, her head was full of things to do, and it was very good to talk on distracted topics. Some people would resent the fact that she was trying to lure the neutral Betelgeuse family to her side, but it was just innocent children's playtime. Out loud, however, she stated that her friend liked strawberries. Lasayana wondered how she knew that. The little girl explained that she only chooses desserts with strawberries. The little girl marveled that she was very considerate. Sometime later, when Nesfor was seeing her guests off, she asked if they would still come to her pearly palace. Betelgeuse replied that, of course, if she invited her, she would gladly come again. She could also bring her horses along for them to ride together. Tiny said she would decide on a place next week and contact her. Then Lasayana waved her hand and said that she was already looking forward to seeing her again. The mercenaries who were watching all this were amused that Her Majesty was making friends and playing with her age. They could not believe their eyes. After a big break, our heroine decided that it was time to return to the office and continue to do important things. A few days later, the little girl decided to tell Adele about the assassination attempt in order to prevent the woman from screaming and raising a high. She covered her mouth with her hands and asked her not to speak loudly. Now Adele had a very important role to play. As long as they were going horseback riding with Lasayana, everything should be fine, but now the maid would need to send Betelgeuse down another road. The woman replied that she understood and would do as Her Majesty said. The little girl asked her not to be so upset, for she was all right. The woman replied that when the one who dared to do so is discovered, let her allow her to hit that person at least once. The girl replied that was fine, just let her not kill him as she needed to find out a lot of things from him. Adele promised to try to calculate the force. The next day, our heroine met Sion in the stables and exclaimed that he looked good in his rider's clothes. The young man said that when she told him that she wanted to ride, he immediately found the horses and they would be here soon. The little girl hoped it wouldn't be foals. The crown prince replied that she could not worry, they were big horses. After all, he knows about the fact that they were the ones she wanted to ride. Approaching the dark-colored horse, Sion said that this is his horse and his name is Niru. And this white horse was specially prepared for Nikki. She doesn't have a name yet, so let her think of a suitable one. When the girl wanted to touch her and stroke her, the horse snorted and dodged her hand. The girl liked that it was strong-willed and therefore perfect for her. Then she decided to name her Nana. Nissafor noted to herself that it had been a long time since she had ridden a horse. Sion offered to quietly take a few laps around the training room. The little girl replied that she wanted to ride with Lasayana soon, so she asked him to find horses. The boy noted that Nikki seemed to be making friends with Betelgeuse's daughter. The young man then asked what was wrong with Nikki. The little girl was surprised that he guessed that something was bothering her. Sion replied that it was because he always looks only at her and knows what expression she has when she is worried about something. Our heroine thought that there was nowhere else to go, so she decided to tell the Crown Prince everything that was going on. She exclaimed if he remembered that the girl had recently organized a small banquet for those who work in the Pearl Palace, after which she added that on that very day she had been attempted to be poisoned. They had brought a barrel of prune juice to the banquet that they had not ordered, and it had poison in it. The boy became very angry and noted that it meant there was a rat in the palace. The little girl said he shouldn't do that because the horse might be frightened. Let him not worry, she will take care of everything herself. The little girl decided to tell him about it, as she thought it would be better if he was aware of it. The young man replied that she was right, of course, but let her tell him the name of the man. He would make his own private secret investigation. The little girl replied that it was Bavaki and she would not miss her chance. The girl will try to kill her before the ship is completed. The Crown Prince said that if she is very sad, let her cry. There was nothing wrong with that. Nesiphor replied that she is not sad. After all, she will be at a meeting with her new friend when she deals with Bavoki. The Crown Principal asked her to remember that she could rely on him at any time. Meanwhile, there was an encounter going on between some man and a huge sea monster. He said that it must be done for the sake of Roxborough, who would be the master of the new world. The next day, Lassiana asked our heroine if she really wanted to go to Angel's Beach, for she had never been there, and it seemed to be very far from the Pearl Palace. Our heroine replied that any problem can be easily solved. If you want to get to Angela's Beach, the fastest and most convenient way is the magic of instant travel. The mage introduced himself to the Dragon Princess' new friend and said his name was Jackalot. Betelgeuse exclaimed that if this young man's name is Shakalot, that means he is the grandson of the master of the magic tower. The boy exclaimed that this was so, and that Her Majesty had specially chosen him because he was very talented. The little girl, on the other hand, thought to herself that she didn't want to call him because he was too noisy. But among those who would be able to protect Lassiana after teleportation, he was the only one she had time for, so it couldn't be helped. Bavoki and Adele approached them and informed them that they had prepared the food to take with them, and they could already set off. Suddenly Heiberg appeared holding a boy by the scruff of his neck and said that he would accompany them too. Our heroine said that his brother said that he had business at the estate, so how he was here and what kind of a boy was he? The young man replied that he finished with his business earlier than she had planned and happened to catch this kid wandering around the Pearl Palace. She had nothing to worry about. Our heroine noted to herself that this seemed to be the same boy who harasses weak children and wondered why he had even come. Then Nisiphor exclaimed that Heiberg should leave because today's trip was to make her friends with Lassiana even more. The young man kissed her hand and said that he seemed to have inconvenienced her by coming suddenly, so he apologized. The girl blushed and said she didn't mind if he went with them. Our heroine noted to herself that apparently he did it on purpose so that Betelgeuse could not refuse him. Then Heiberg said that since the majority was in favor, let Shakalot open the teleportation circle. After a little thought, the cheeky boy shouted that he too wanted to go along with them. Literally moments later, they were on Angel's Beach, and the girls marveled at how beautiful it was all around. Our heroine said that before going horseback riding, it was necessary to eat a big meal. The maids immediately laid out everything needed for a picnic and a snack. Then the Dragon Princess said that she had taken enough food for everyone, so everyone should eat together. After that, everyone sat down on the bed to have a comfortable breakfast and chat. After a while, our heroine noticed that her brother did not eat and asked why. The young man replied that he had just taken something else with him. His servant handed him a box. These cakes were prepared by a new pastry chef that had recently been hired by the duchy. Lassiana quietly asked Nisiphor if Duke Roussillon always had this image. The little girl replied that he had. After a while, our heroine was ready to go horseback riding and told Heiberg not to follow her, for she wanted to have fun alone tonight. Then she looked at Betelgeuse and thought that she didn't have to worry about her, because she had explained everything in detail to Adele. Besides, there's also Shakalot, who she told that if he defends the girl well today, she will take him as her apprentice. But it is necessary to make sure that not a single hair falls from her head, and if something terrible happens, let him close her eyes. The young man noted that if the Dragon Princess says so, then something interesting must happen. Then our heroine and her friend went horseback riding, and everything went according to plan for about an hour. But how could such a situation happen? Of all the options she had envisioned, the one where she was left alone with Lasayana an hour later should not have happened. The girl should have been at the beach at that time and finishing her trip. So why had Shakalot sent them there? A little earlier, Betelgeuse had noticed a beautiful, shiny stone that appeared to be quartz and suggested that they come closer to examine it. But suddenly some creature grabbed her horse by the leg with its tentacles. The girl began to fall to the ground, but her elder brother managed to pick her up in his arms, then ordered Nicephorus to leave with her as quickly as possible. In front of them appeared a huge sea monster that had come from an unknown place. The girl told Shakalot that, to begin with, let him protect Lasayana, and she would return later once she knew everything. The young man exclaimed that he should have been warned sooner. After all, he thought the situation was very dangerous and prepared everything for teleportation. The little girl screamed that he was crazy because if they separated, things would get much worse. But there was nothing to be done and the girls disappeared. The little girl was angry because she had asked to be sent alone into the forest after they finished riding horses. So why would he send them there because it was suddenly dangerous? Apparently, he wanted to prove he didn't just learn for nothing. The nymph said that the beach was very far away and going there on foot would take a large amount of time. Nicephore thought that she had not counted on him to move them so far away. Apparently, the wizard was in a hurry. Lasayana asked frustratedly what they should do, since they seemed to be lost. The little girl noted to herself that she had probably never been separated from her maids and knights in her life. So the dragon princess hugged her and tried to reassure her, saying that everything would be all right. Suddenly they began to hear strange sounds, and the girl thought to herself that it must be an animal, as a killer would not make such a sound. Seeing the sea monster in front of her, the little girl could not believe her eyes, that it was an aquatic creature, and how she could even be in the forest. The little girl noted to herself that he looked different than usual. He had a strange shape. It felt like something had been done to it. Then told Betelgeuse to close her eyes and make no sound. Let her not worry, for everything will be fine and will be over soon. Let her trust her, the babe will do the right thing. Baby doesn't know who sent this huge shape-shifting water monster, but he sure doesn't know much about sea creatures. The water monster becomes much weaker on land, so now we can test what it can do. Meanwhile, the elder brother was dealing with the sea creatures and noted that they were not getting smaller no matter how many they killed. What kind of creatures are these? The wizard shouted that he had everything ready to destroy them all in one fell swoop. The surroundings immediately became dark and lightning bolts began to strike these monsters. When it was over, Heberg asked if everyone was all right and if anyone was hurt. But suddenly he noticed that the maids and the boy had disappeared. Jackalot exclaimed in surprise that they had just been there. The Duke clutched his head and asked where the mage had sent Her Majesty. The young man said that he had accurately directed them deep into the forest, then ordered him to gather all the knights and monsters and go to the palace. And if he failed to do so, the young man would hold him fully responsible for the failure of the operation. Suddenly, a powerful explosion sounded in the depths of the forest, and the boys noted that it seemed to be where the dragon princess was. Heberg noticed that the energy that emanates from Nicephore is simply incredible. Meanwhile, our heroine told her friend that there was no one else around them, so she could take it easy and let her wipe away her tears. Then added that her older brother would soon bring the mage, and they would immediately return home. After that, she apologized for what she had to go through, as the little girl just wanted to ride horses. Betelgeuse thanked her for saving her. Nikki replied that it had all happened because of her, so she was not to be thanked. She had been tried to poison her many times, but this was the first time monsters had been sent. Lasayana noted that the dragon princess is amazing, because even in such a difficult situation, she continues to smile and remains in a good mood. The little girl was actually sitting in suspense because she didn't know at what exact moment the assassin might attack, so she couldn't relax. Then the girl worriedly asked how all those who remained on the shore, whether they were all right. Nicephore replied that there was no need to worry because they would be protected by Heberg. Then our heroine noted that the birds suddenly became quiet, which meant that someone was hiding in the trees. Others could not notice it, but it cannot happen to her. The little girl turned to Lasayana and told her to listen to her carefully. It seems she will have to fight again, so don't let her worry. Everything will be perfectly fine. Suddenly, some woman in a maid's uniform came out of the forest, and judging from Betelgeuse's reaction, it was probably her subordinate. The girl immediately rushed to her in tears and began to hug her, saying that she was very scared, but the woman for some reason stood silent. Suddenly, the maid fell to the ground as if she had suddenly lost consciousness. Bavoki immediately appeared, who grabbed Lysian and put a knife to her throat. Our heroine noted to herself that it was very mean to take a defenseless child hostage. Suddenly, some other man came out of the woods who was holding Bane Garrett in his hands, and the boy shouted at her not to touch Lysian, otherwise he would kill her. The kid had apparently had enough of his threats, and the young man set him on the ground, covering his mouth with his hand. Bavoki threw the dagger at our heroine's feet and said that no one could kill her, so let her kill herself and it would be her only chance to save her friends. The little girl said that she had already given her several chances, and it turns out that this is the option she decided to choose. Nesiphor said that she will not forgive Betrayal anymore, so now there will be a punishment for Bavoki testing her patience to the very end. The girl said that she had warned her that if she decided to throw anything away, she would kill her friend. Our heroine thought to herself that the power of the sea, which comes from her, now covers the whole forest. So that means that all of it has become her territory. Everything that happens around her is now within her perception. For the moment, there was someone else hiding behind Bavoka's back. Maybe it was the one who had always been on her side, the one who had always cared for her and only had eyes for her. It was Adele who twisted Bavoki around in a flash and exclaimed, "How dare she do such a thing?" Bavoki was not an easy killer. She had peculiar steps and movements to her that Nesiphor did not immediately notice. After our heroine ordered the boy to be released, he began to kick the man and talk about how he had promised that he would take revenge. Then the little girl said that everyone in her territory should instantly fall asleep. It was very hard for the girl, because the stronger the spell, the more strength it takes away. Suddenly the Emperor appeared, who picked her up in his arms and began to ask her worriedly if she was all right. The girl didn't understand what was wrong with his hair or why he was dressed like that, then exclaimed that the girl needed to live another 10 centuries to hurt her. The man exhaled and pulled her tightly against him. Nesiphor thought to herself that he must have been too nervous to run into the forest, but he could have taken his time.